Wakefield, and welcome to the September 13th, 2021 Town Council meeting. I hereby call this meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As for attendance, it appears that we have all of the counselors present and Peter May is here, so we have everyone in attendance. Sherry. Peter May and Ed Dabrowski are on Zoom, and the rest are here in studio, so we'll try to make this work. If I don't see the hand, Peter or Ed in the corner, just raise your real hand. Okay. Item number 4, public engagement. Sherry, do we have anyone for public engagement?
Yes, Julie, we do. Tonight we have a couple people joining us. The first one is Scott Saite of 29 Preston Street.
Okay. Scott,
thanks, Sherry.
Go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'd just like to voice my support in favor of the application before the council to approve a one-day liquor license to Idle Hands Craft Ales of Malden. I've known Chris Sakach, owner and founder of Idle Hands, as well as his team for a little over 4 years now, personally and professionally. So my day job is in PR. We work with a lot of craft breweries, and Idle Hands is definitely one of the best and most respected in the state. So I just wanted to vouch for Chris, his team, and Idle Hands as a whole. They've been in business for over 10 years, just celebrated 10 years last weekend. They were voted Best of Boston last year by Boston Magazine, and they have a really great reputation in the industry. So I'm pretty confident that their proposed event will be a success and serve as an additional draw to Wakefield's local businesses. So I just ask the town council please vote to approve the one-day liquor license. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sherry?
And then, and the next one we have, Julie, with us is John Natali of 65 Plymouth Road.
John?
Hi, everyone. I don't have a formal role of the town, but I second whatever people are voting for in favor of Idle Hands. Four-Seam IPA can't be beat, and I promise you I'm not being paid to sponsor it. Although I would take the money and the beer. So, I don't know. I struggle with what to say here. I'm a representative from the people who live on Broadway and off of Broadway. And I know that the technicalities of this and pretty much every grievance entailed has been discussed. Not at an exhaustive level because that would be pejorative, but just we've covered it all. You know how we feel. We understand what happened with the project and all the ripple effects that it's had. And, as of the last communication in town meeting, we've been getting our hopes up. We feel like an end is in sight, but the date keeps changing. We were told Labor Day. We were told September 20th. We got some insight about the public comment period. And if it has moved the direction that I've heard it has, the public comment period is probably going to be extended. We may go back past the September 20th date. And I'm trying to be an optimist about this, but the fact is you've got people here who are often trapped, and we're not going anyplace fun. We're trying to get our kids across this, the town to Woodville. We're trying to get back in time for a Zoom call so we don't look bad versus the people that, don't have to do the family things that we do. So we're late to the game and we look bad, and we know our companies are looking to fire people. We're trying to make sure that our kids are able to get where we need them to, practices. They're at different ages. I have 2 police officers who live on my street. How do you get to emergencies and to and from in this area when the Broadway station is blocked off, when you've got 2 construction projects for massive condo buildings on the Foundry Street Thruway, when the totality of Broadway is being torn apart every day on both sides, and we are finding fewer ways to get in and out. I could go on. It's just sometimes I think about, our town clearly has a command of the details. We get information about what happened a lot, but I just wonder how you signed off on all this at the same time. Knowing that it would be happening simultaneously and diverting public funds, resources, and attention to marginally broadening the sidewalks on Albion while all this is happening. You know, I don't want any outcomes. Honestly, I don't need any answers. We've heard for several months going back, maybe even more than several months now. It started out with just a few more weeks, friends. You know, just a few more months. You know, we understand that our neighbors are frustrated. Okay, something's coming up, public comment period. You know, we hear things like, geez, you know, we emailed the guy at the Federal Railroad Administration, but he hasn't gotten back to us. And I'm just, or we've inherited the problem. Yeah. And, you know, you pass that along to the town paper too. We've inherited the problem. And it's just, I think about all this. If I had a situation like this at work, I'd be held accountable. I can't. You know, I don't want to get personal here. I know everybody's working really hard, and our town council, they've got day jobs. They've got, you know, people to take care of. You know, I really commend the fact that there are people in this town that care about it and represent it term after term. It's just, we're tired because like the basics of life are exhausting now where we live.
Yes.
And I mean, honestly, it's just, is early harvest going to shut down soon? I mean, it kind of seems like they're bleeding revenue. What I want to know is not the best case scenario or what we're hopeful about or what we want to happen. Just start giving us worst case scenarios. Like, give us the worst case scenario for dates, what's going to happen, because we're getting our hopes up and we see blips of optimism, like construction being done at the crossing, but we don't know what's for real anymore.
So, Mr. Tell, I'm going to interrupt you there because we are actually going to have a full report on this, on item number 6. So I'll give you another 30 seconds if you want to conclude, and then
I'll take that 30 seconds. It's just, there's been a formula to every single one of these meetings. We're all riled up. One of us speaks. You know, the person in charge of, you know, the town engineering has a really well documented account of what happened and why and what we're doing currently to try to remediate the situation. Someone expresses some empathy. Someone maybe lived close to Broadway, so they relate to us. Someone says, we're sorry for your frustration. But how long has it been? So, you know, I hope this report surprises me. I hope I look like an idiot and I'm humiliated because you guys had like the best news ever. I would take that embarrassment and wear it like a scarlet A if I could just find out that something worked out in our favor.
We'll give you all the credit if we have
emergency responders getting the shaft here on Broadway. And, you know, no matter what, you can't change the history of how this all came together. So I hope there's a good outcome tonight or soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sherry, anyone else?
No, that's it, Julie.
Okay, we actually have some public here in studio. Mr. Guardia, Mr. Seabold, if you want to introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Anthony Guardia from 27 Davy Lane in Wakefield.
I'm George Seabold from One Tom's Way in Stoneham.
And what is the purpose of your being here?
We're going to challenge the Wakefield Council again to another dodgeball game. And nice to see Pete. I haven't seen you, and I hope all is well. And Ed, I'm not surprised you're not here because you're scared. I just want. No, but on a serious note, I know we like to give each other a hard time back and forth, but it's all about the Boys and Girls Club and how well they have these kids, and it's a nice structured place, and all the proceeds go to them, which is a great for the kids, and it's always great competing against you guys because obviously we keep getting the trophies, so and just hopefully we can have a nice match and continue the tradition.
Now, and the person who's responsible for organizing most of it keeps trying to cheat to have Wakefield win, and it hasn't worked out at all. I was sent an email from Dennis Sheehan. He was going to come by tonight. He has another meeting. He did ask me to read, I love nothing more than giving my friends in Wakefield a hard time. Please let Steve know my hair is much better than his, and if he plays, his hair will get knocked out of shape. I will try to get it to move.
Challenges. Yeah.
So, but no, in all seriousness, these are two wonderful communities. You know, we've been lucky enough to work in a few communities now. George, I know I'm stealing a little bit of your thunder. You said you were going to say this, but both Stoneham and Wakefield are incredibly well run. Steve, Dennis, and the respective boards, and you see that in the community atmosphere. Maybe not, you know, the data minutia of running government gets lost, but the community spirit of like God, whether it was the ALS walk the other day for the Angel Fund, whether it's the 4th of July parades, whether it's what's happening with the school buildings in Stoneham, the variety. I mean, we just had 130 kids sign up for our teen center and all these parents, and it was just incredible compliments. And you see this in both towns, and I think that's a reflection of the character of the leadership in both towns. So kudos to you. Now, George, do you want to go back to making fun of everybody, or?
No, I'm a year older, so I'm a lot more mature now. So,
No,
again, not to interrupt you, and when we did go through our challenges, Steve, I used to call you all the time, and again, can't thank you enough for the information and help that you gave us. We went through a little rocky road there with.
So Anthony, what are the details? Is there a
Details.
date set
yeah,
for this
actually, we should
challenge?
probably. So, November 6th, which is Saturday, 10 a.m. We're going to be in Stoneham. Are you away?
We have town meeting that day.
Oh, we have time. So we're going to move it to. Thank you for. See, this is why someone should know. See, they're trying to get out of playing. That's
Yeah,
why.
well, it's understandable. Then is it going to be closer to Christmas? We don't want to ruin your holidays.
No good move. So November 13th, we'll get back to you. We'll probably just move it to the next Saturday. We're at the very beginning of the planning phase stage, so we have enough time. But most likely what we try to do is a Saturday morning. So arguably it'd be November 13th. We want to do it a little bit closer to the holidays so that most of the money raised will go. As many people know, both Wakefield and Stoneham have big holiday drives where we try to use the funding. Probably, I would say, any money raised around after Veterans Day at the Boys and Girls Clubs. I don't want to say all of it, but a significant percentage tends to go towards holiday drives. And if anything, this year is like last year. We were overwhelmed with demand. In most years, we usually don't start getting requests for Christmas help or holiday help probably until after Veterans Day. This year already, we've started having people ask for assistance, which is similar to what happened last year. So it's pretty early on, which means we'll have a high demand. So I would say November 13th, rough tentatively, I'll confirm, and it'll be at the Stoneham Club, 15 Dale Court. Some of the Stoneham leaders have complained we've been in Wakefield for the past few years, so they want to bring it back to their home court.
Well, I'm not going to play with these on either. So that's why we're going to go to Stoneham.
Well, we're happy to beat you on your home court.
No, but seriously, thank you guys. Thank you for everything, and you all do a wonderful job.
Good luck with the project. We had a project come through our town, and it was a nightmare for a lot of residents for a while, and then the only good thing about it, if it keeping peace of mind, when it's done, and the road gets put back to in a nice, better than it was. So hopefully everything works out here.
Great, thanks for coming.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Sorry, I know you don't want me to touch them.
I'd say, Madam Chair, we could invite Mr. Siebel to stay for our bond update later. I mean, he can keep his trophies on the table.
He keeps the
I'm just
trophies, we
saying.
keep the good rating?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I hear my mom calling me.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Piper.
Okay, moving on to item 5, we have 3 sets of minutes to approve. The first is the approval of the August 2nd, 2021 Town Council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So moved by Counselor Santos, second by Counselor Butt. Roll call vote, Counselor Danahy.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor May.
Yes.
And Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
And myself, yes. Second set of minutes, the approval of the August 2nd, 2021 executive session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
So moved by Counselor Santos, second by Counselor Butt. Roll call vote, Counselor Danahy.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor May.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
And myself, yes. Finally, we have the approval of the August 30th, 2021 Town Council meeting minutes. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Counselor Santos, second by Counselor Butt. Roll call vote, Counselor Danahy.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor May.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
And myself, yes. Okay, item number 6, the Broadway Street update. I believe we are giving that to Mr. Renaud, unless, Steve, you have an introduction?
I just want to say that Bill is going to give us an update that I think is pretty positive. And Bill has done an incredible job on this, with given a tough situation and, working with, let's say, an institution that doesn't seem to have the same level of, I'm going to say efficiency that our engineering department has. So go ahead, Bill, take it from there.
Well, thank you, Steve, and good evening, everybody. So as you recall, we filed our public authority application back late June. That had a 60-day appeal period, which was supposed to end on August 29th. In that time frame, we didn't receive any comments on the proposed modifications to the intersections that we submitted back in June. To date, we unfortunately have not received the approval letter from FRA. We were told that we would have it on the 30th, but that has not shown up. And obviously over the past few weeks, I've been spending many, many hours calling every number that I have at FRA to get some answers and some alternatives to move this along. So basically the short of it is that we were able to negotiate with them to allow the crossing to open with the horn sounding and us to remain with our pre-rule quiet zone as soon as we have the installation of all of the improvements that we outlined in our application. They were willing to give us essentially that small concession to allow this to open up so that we do not have to wait for essentially their slow paperwork process to play out. What we think that time frame is going to be, I mean, we're on schedule right now for the 20th, which was our intended opening date. That is still on the table right now. We have construction that's actively going on. Our contractors telling us they will be done to meet that deadline. I would then have one meeting that I have to have essentially a site walk with the FRA inspector to okay it, and then it would open up. So we are on schedule for a 20th, September 20th opening. But we would have the train horn sound through the town until we get the official paperwork that comes through. So that's really up to the council now to decide if they'd like to have that happen. Keep in mind, it wouldn't just be blown at Broadway, it'd be blown through the entire town because the quiet zone does affect the entire town, as I've laid out a bunch of times previously. So that's where we're at. So it's not perfect news, but I would say there's a silver lining to the report today. So.
And I might add that the FRA site walk is our local FRA rep, Bill, if I'm wrong, he's been with us every step of the way, and actually he's been very helpful in pushing this forward and going up the chain he's kind of adopted us as trying to help us out here. So he's on board, ready to go.
Exactly.
So we don't have to wait for someone to come up from Washington, D.C. or anything.
Yep, so as soon as construction's completed, he can be out there. He's usually there within 6 hours. I need about that to get him out there. So we'd probably be looking at, the next day for him to be able to be out there. So we're looking at the 20th for that site walk to happen. That's what I'm targeting right now. That was our initial opening date. So the goal would be to have that open by close of business, provided schedules line up, but I can't see it, extending more than a day beyond. So just going to give you an idea. So we're looking at, early week of the 20th for the opening, if the council chooses to do that.
Councilor Santos and then Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you so much, Bill. So, I mean, clearly we heard, we've been listening to the neighbors for a long time, and I can appreciate their frustration in it getting just so bad at this point and trying to juggle working at home, dropping kids off. I mean, on a good day, that's hard, but not when you have to try to avoid all this mess. Is there if the construction finishes, early on the 20th or late on the 19th, will our FRA guy come out as soon as possible? Does he know how dire this is that we open it?
Oh, yes, he's well aware of it, and he's been helping us through the process. So he definitely has been and has been getting us in touch with the right people. So he's helped us to go over the reviewer's head to the, essentially the section chief for this program. And he's the one that has allowed us to essentially open this thing up with the horn sounding in a temporary window while the paperwork gets adjusted. We had a lot of things in writing from them outlining, that we don't lose our pre-rule quiet zone. That was probably the most critical piece of it from my perspective. And then, he also, noted the time frame for the reviewer. She has a backlog of approvals supposedly. And then also she's on special assignment in Texas. So we wouldn't be looking to get that approval letter and start the next round of application with that 21-day appeal period, that wouldn't be starting probably for another 2 weeks from today. So, this definitely moves us up about a month or so from what we would have probably been opening if we had every approval line up. But it gets us open. I think that's pretty clear with what we heard from Mr. Natale earlier today. So it's something that the neighborhood's definitely looking to have happen, and we've done our best to facilitate it. Ideally, not in ideal conditions, but at least we have a solution that allows it to open up a little sooner.
Great. And Steve, is there a way we're going to can Jen put out something with regard to the horns blowing?
Absolutely.
'Cause I remember when the horns used to blow through every intersection. It's not something new that's new to Wakefield, but it will be a stark difference for people who haven't had that, just to let them know it's coming. But I think that's a excellent trade-off, that some people have to listen to the horns if we can allow Broadway to open for those folks. So thank you very much.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bill, for, I know the work you've been doing for a very long time on this, and I know you've been doing everything you possibly can to try to move this along. We have to open this up as fast as humanly possible at this point, and I think we all understand that. The residents have been through enough, and I think they recognize the roadblocks that have been put up here, but we have to open it. So I strongly support this compromise. The horns are going to sound for a few weeks probably. We'll all get through that. It's a small price to pay because people need to be able to travel that way. It's just been way too long. But I also think that this also opens up, first we need to get Broadway squared away, obviously, but it also opens up a broader discussion for us in terms of prioritizing these crossings generally across town. I know, Bill, in your prior presentations, you've raised that as an issue. I think we as the council need to recognize the realities of how much of a priority we need to make these other crossings going forward, because of where our scoring will continue to be even after this is done. And I know that there are costs involved. I know that there are timelines we need to be looking at, but I think that the reality is we can't have a situation like this ever happen again, at one of our other crossings. And so whatever we have to do as a body to make sure that we're as proactive as we can, I think those discussions really need to begin as soon as Broadway opens and just continue until we have some sort of game plan in place going forward and figure out a way to fund it, because this has been a real test for a lot of folks, and I think we could see, we just can't have something like this happen again. But thank you again for your efforts, and I'm excited that we finally get some relief on the 20th for these folks that are most impacted.
Thank you. Councilor Chines.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Renaud. The frustration I think we've all felt in this process is something that you've been living really on a day-to-day basis for like the last year. I don't think I can recall sort of a story that has as much sort of bureaucratic delay and incompetence on the part of the FRA as anything that we've seen here. And certainly I'm glad that at least your local contact has been responsive, but I can understand the frustration that you've had and appreciate the great work that you've done here. I did want to ask a question just in the spirit of Mr. Natale's comments earlier. What do we think the worst case scenario is in terms of getting the final approval for reopening without the horns? So it sounds like kind of the best case scenario is we've got maybe a few weeks with horns. I mean, can we venture a guess, or do we have any indication as to, if for whatever reason the letter isn't reviewed or isn't produced in the next couple of weeks, are we talking months? Are we talking several months? Any sense as to sort of what that worst case scenario might look like?
Yeah, so I think that the horns will be sounding for a good, I would expect it to be about 5 weeks, just to be clear. So I'm being told 2 weeks until I get the first approval letter. As soon as I have that, I have a second filing. That has a 21-day appeal period. So, really what the timing would be for that response on the second filing, that they turned it around previously in about right around the appeal period. So they were about a 21-day, turnaround for that first filing that we did. That's the one that closed Broadway back at the beginning of the year. So, I would say, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I feel that probably has happened a little bit here, unfortunately, with relaying the information as it's been given to me. I'm being told it's a 2-week time frame for that first letter. That could be a month. That could be a month and a half, 2 months. So, I really don't have a good handle on that, to be perfectly honest with you. I can tell you that if I don't have it within 2 weeks, I will be calling the person that oversees that division in this program to get that moving. But, ultimately, I think that optimistically we'd be looking at 5 weeks, and then, any delays would be adding additional weeks beyond that. So we may be looking into early November, mid-November too. I mean, that is definitely a possibility.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, and appreciate you taking a stab at that question. I mean, it's not an easy question to answer because ultimately we can't answer it. And I would just maybe suggest, Mr. Mayo, as we think about the communication, I would maybe think about communicating a range of time, just given. I certainly don't have any faith that the FRA will actually get the letter out in 2 weeks. I mean, if they do, I'd be very pleasantly surprised, but I guess I'll believe that when I see it.
And I have a message here from Councillor May. I think we all agree, residents have suffered enough, and the compromise is a step in the right direction. Bring on the horns.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or?
Just to say on the horns, I mean, I'm sensitive to the fact that I think the horns are an imposition to people that live nearby, and I just want to make sure. I mean, I do think that we need to open the crossing. It's been too long, but for the folks that do live in the area, and really in the area of the train tracks from border to border, I mean, we're talking about people in Greenwood as well, and I at least for me, this isn't a vote that I take lightly. I do think that it's a big imposition, and I just want people to know that it's something that I think is balancing really, two less than ideal circumstances.
Yeah, I think everybody realizes that is not the ideal situation, but to get that open for the Broadway residents is absolutely critical. So Steve, we actually have to take a vote.
I think we'd like it just to open the Broadway as presented.
So I think, does somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we open Broadway as presented by the presentation that Bill Renaud said, understanding that the horns will be heard for the foreseeable future. We'll try to do the best we can in getting those letters done. But so we open Broadway with the horns blowing. That's the motion.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible. As soon as possible.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Councillor Danahy?
Yes.
Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Councillor Chines?
Yes.
Councillor May?
Yes.
Councillor Dobrowski?
Aye.
And myself, yes. Okay, so,
Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Renaud,
Very welcome.
thank you
Bill.
very, very much.
Don't go away, you're coming back.
I'll be back.
Okay. Item number 7 is the request from Idle Hands Craft Ales for a 1-day liquor license on September 25th at Veterans Field from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. There's additional details in the packet. Steve, you've had extensive conversations with them, or is there somebody here to present?
Yes, and Chris Talk, the president and founder of Idle Hands, is on. If
Mr.
you'd like
Talk,
to hear from
welcome
him.
very
Yeah.
much. Would you like to give us
Hi
an
there,
overview
councilors.
of your request?
Yeah, I would love to present to you kind of our idea and our plans. So in essence, we want to create an outdoor beer garden for people to enjoy. Come there, have a few beers, maybe venture around the lake or go downtown afterwards and have a meal. The idea is really to create a draw to that part of Wakefield and hopefully bring some people into town and have them experience how nice of an area it is. We want to do this on a Saturday because that would be, the best time to do it, as people are always looking for things to do on the weekends. And the couple ideas that we had, one of them was to put it in the Veterans Field area. The other one is to put it over in the Lower Common area. I understand that there's a farmer's market that is scheduled for Saturdays that runs from 9 to 1. And I was just been spending some time looking to see kind of what their setup is like over in the Veterans Field area. And ideally we would want to kind of start this around noon time and run it to about 6 o'clock. And so there's a little bit of overlap there, which I think might be a little bit of concern to a few people. But I don't know if there's a possibility of maybe kind of sharing that space, for that 1 hour or so. The one problem I see, I guess, is we're starting to run across a little bit of daylight issues getting into September. So in reality, we really need to be kind of done by 6 o'clock so that we have time to get everything cleaned up and everything. And it'll take us about an hour or so to probably get everything set up as well. So, the more we kind of, I guess, compress that time frame, the harder it becomes for us to kind of really make a go of it. So I'm open to suggestions, obviously. The part of the plan with the beer garden is to work with some local businesses. And we have a relationship with a couple of businesses in town that carry our beer. I haven't reached out to them directly yet to kind of see what their interest is in. But part of that is to obviously make sure that people that are coming to enjoy our beer also have some nourishment as well. That it's just not a place to go and get drunk. Not that it is anyways. If any of you have been to our tap room, we run a pretty tight ship there, and we don't promote a place for it to be kind of really like a party type of thing, and we wouldn't expect that our beer garden would be anything different than kind of really what our tap room is like. We pride ourselves in allowing children in our tap room, and we get a lot of families that come in there, particularly Saturday, early afternoon. We call it the stroller crowd that comes in, and they bring their little ones. The parents will sit down and have a beer or two, and the little ones will sit there and play some games or hang out with mom and dad. And it's kind of a nice little family time for everybody. So we want to kind of take that on the road and bring it to the town.
Thank you. I'll open it up for discussion. Councilor Santos?
Steve, this might be more for you, and thank you, Chris. I think it's a fabulous idea. And depending upon where it's set up, I'm not as worried about a small overlap. I think a small overlap might be nice. I go to the farmer's market every Saturday, and I would like to walk a few steps away and go into a beer garden. That sounds like a perfect situation. If it's something...
I think if you go towards the parking area...
Heading towards American Mutual.
Heading towards the cemetery, hate to say that, but the Lakeside Ave, I think it's called, there. We could put, in that area, there's plenty of room. The other thing is that we will have vaccinations available for the public, trying to go where the people are. So we'll have some vaccinations there and or vaccinations available. And, I talked to Chris, and Erin did a great job with this. I know Erin's on, but maybe she's not on our screen here. Wanted to make this, not just a beer sampling event, but games and cornhole and things you find at beer gardens. You see them all over the city, and hopefully entice idle hands or businesses like them to come and open up a brick and mortars place in town. So that's what our thought is here. So we can certainly accommodate
there is that opportunity. So, we are kind of outgrowing our space in Malden, so we are kind of looking at what our next steps are. So,
So we'll work to move them.
Obviously.
We'll move that down to that area. That'll be fine.
Councilor Dennehy?
I have a question. Could it go on the lower common? I'm just thinking too, is it on the lower common might be closer to people going there and then going meandering into our downtown?
I think at the lower common there are events scheduled now, walks and things. So
okay.
I think this has kind of become and I think we like the overlap idea actually with the farmers market.
Okay.
People are going there for
Yeah.
purchasing kind of thing anyway. So
As long as there's room.
Yep.
And would there be police detail?
Yes, we'll have a police detail.
Police detail, okay. And then I think partnering with local food vendors is great, and I think also just having maybe even a palm card available of all the local restaurants in town that when people could just get that so that then afterwards they're looking to get something, going out to dinner, that they can choose Wakefield.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's a great idea. And I like 5% going back to the neighborhood association. So I think, yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think it'll bring a lot of vibrancy.
Councillor Shines?
Great, thank you. And thank you, Chris, for the presentation and the idea. I also, like the idea of having an event like this. Just a couple of questions, and the first one is either for Mr. Mayo or Ms. Dalton. I'm assuming we received sort of the appropriate applications, according to our lake use policy in terms of, using the space and so forth.
This is we will have it filled out with the police and fire coming, and they're all fine with it. We've already talked about it. But
Yes,
you have
we
it?
did fill
Oh,
out
you
an
got it? Okay.
application, and the departments have signed off
Great.
on it, yeah.
Okay, great,
With the
thank
portal,
you.
I didn't even see it.
I
She's more efficient
know.
than I am.
Now that we're paperless, it's, we don't get as much of the backup. But I appreciate you confirming that, Sherry. And then, Chris, just a question for you. In terms of the funds going to WCNA, is the intent that that's 5% of the gross sales for the day or the net?
That would be the gross sales. It's just the easiest way to figure it out in the end.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a few questions. So in terms of sales, and then I'll get, I don't want you to go ahead. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chris. I think this is a phenomenal idea, and I'll tell you that you can look at other communities, but Wakefield is going to be where you're going to want it to land ultimately. So I'll just put that out there. But go through it, do your due diligence. But we'll see you in Wakefield. One thing I'm wondering, we are really trying to drive foot traffic to the downtown, and I know that's always been a discussion with where the farmers market is located, because it's not in as close proximity as let's say, like the Lower Common. If the Lower Common's not an option, I know in the Envision project, part of what we're envisioning is around the Rockery. So if you go down Common, basically, for that stretch where where the church had been and will be rebuilt. But there's a stretch there and behind the Rockery, we could potentially cordon off those two sections and have, I think, Steve, that approximate amount of space. I don't have the numbers offhand, but I think if you remove if you include the parking in that, I think you have the width.
Oh, possibly, yeah.
Do you not? Because if we did that and then blocked off like behind the Rockery, that's also another large stretch. So you create a large stretch. It's within much closer walking distance to the downtown. I think you'd actually attract a lot of people who may be downtown to come over to it as well, and it kind of keeps it a little bit more centered in the center of where commerce is going on. So if that was viable, I think that would be a pretty good option, especially as it gets later in the day too.
Ed, do you have like a cross street that I can reference?
So if you look at Lafayette, you look at Common Lafayette and where Artichokes is, the Rockery right there. So between the Rockery and Artichokes is basically one section, and then behind the Rockery, if you closed off that street, you could still get onto Lafayette by going down to Church, taking a left, then taking a left onto Common, and then getting to Lafayette.
Yep, I see it. Yeah, that would be a good option too, I think. And the one thing that we've learned, particularly with our tap room, is that people, even though we have limited food in our tap room available, by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, people are ready to go out and have dinner. And so generally historically our numbers or our attendance around that time frame really starts to dip. So I think people are programmed, they'll come out, have a few beers, and then continue on, with their night out. So I think the closer we can kind of get to that downtown area where there are restaurants to go to, that would probably be beneficial.
I would like to see families too. I know you mentioned families, Chris, being important. Families going down, being near Cravings or going to Public Kitchen, which is right there, or like any of the any of the places, Socorro, any place that's open down there. I just feel like if it's within walking distance there, I think people are more inclined to, grab a beer or two and then go to a restaurant afterwards. And I think that we would have enough space there. And the planning is that eventually this would be almost like a bit of like a a bit of like a plaza where we could, close off with limited, disruption to folks, but have something that's a bit more central to our downtown area.
Councilor Santos?
Do we have to decide the place right now, where we're putting it? I appreciate what you're saying, Ed, but I'm wondering, for this event, who is our audience? I would rather I want to entice Chris in his business to appreciate how awesome Wakefield is. I think by the lake, with that lake vista, would be absolutely beautiful for people to enjoy a beer garden. I don't think we get the same thing at the Rockery. And for future events, yes, this is a one-time event. I mean, if we were going to do it again, we could talk about getting closer to town. But I also think we've tried so many times to bring people in from events to downtown and haven't been so successful. If it's at the Rockery, will people walk downtown maybe? They might, but I don't know. I imagine like this beautiful beer garden on the lake looking out at the water. To me, and having the farmer's market, to me seems like a real lifting up of Chris's business, advertising the business, and then us saying like, this is something we would love to have in Wakefield. I understand what you're saying.
I think if that's the case, I think that the Lower Common would be, the more appropriate of the two. I'm not opposed to along the lake, but it's closer to the downtown. We could perhaps like have some signage directing people more to the downtown. And I think it's probably a prettier vista point anyway. So I don't know what the event is or if there's a workaround for whatever is scheduled on down on the Lower Common. But I mean, Lower Common's huge. So I think we have the opportunity to do that. If the concern is trying to capitalize on the lake, but it at least gets people in that vicinity a lot better, because people who are like at Betts Field are not going to be walking over to downtown to the restaurants afterwards. Not going to do it. But if you're Lower Common, I think there's a good chance you will walk the much shorter distance to do it. Your car is probably much closer, so you're probably more inclined to do it. I would just like to see it migrated over closer to the downtown business district.
Councilor
What's the event that's holding up that it would prevent this from happening on the Lower Common?
I'm going to ask Sherry I know that we're busy every weekend. Maybe she can pull that up at the Lower Common. Is there something on that day?
Yeah, I am trying to pull that up. On my Excel spreadsheet, I had American Prevention for Suicide. I'm just checking the portal now to see about an application. This is going to take me a minute.
So while we're doing that, my question was somewhat related, thinking this through. Are you selling open beers? Are you also selling to go? So people who are coming from the farmer's market, can they buy a 4-pack and go? So how is that going to work?
I wish that was a possibility, but the
Okay.
way the licensing works, it's only
That's what I thought.
on premise.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how we're doing it. We're doing it on premises.
Only,
Okay. And I will just say, I like the idea on the lake, because I'm always the one who's worried about just alcohol-only events, and I really like the idea of games set up, and I feel like families might be more willing to come out if it's somewhere around the lake. There's just more space to set up a picnic blanket and hang out with your family. So there won't be any restrictions to people coming, even if they're not buying alcohol, right? There's not like a ticket to get in. You just can come down. If you want to go buy, you do that. Okay, thank you. Councilor Tynes?
Through you, a question to Mr. Mayo. It sounds like there's been some discussion with, the police department and others around the sighting. Do you have any feedback on sort of their thoughts on one location versus the other?
I don't think either one would affect them that much. I mean, as long
Okay.
as it's a contained area and they can monitor it, I'm not. What's good about the lake site is that you're not blocking off any streets, so there's no. But in this area, you're not really worried anyway.
Yeah.
Where Ed was talking about, so.
And I just want to add that Peter says he thinks this is a really great idea. You have my vote. Good luck. And he also favors the lake location.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also mindful of the time, given that the proposed date's less than 2 weeks away. I mean, I think, my perspective would be, Given the other event happening on the lake, I'm not wild about the juxtaposition of having a beer garden next to a suicide prevention event. I'm not sure that that's a great combination there. I would probably be interested in seeing it happen at Vetsfield. But, I think, Councilor Dombrowski's point is an excellent one. And, that's certainly one of the reasons why we're doing the Envision project, is so that we have more flexibility with spaces, downtown to be able to do things like that. So certainly hope that's something we can do in the future.
And I know that if this works out, Chris might want to come back.
That's
and
right.
try out the other space.
Maybe
You
you
may
can try
have
all
permanent
three
space
at some point.
I'll be honest with you. I've been in love with that whole lake area for several years. I went to some festival that was there a few years ago, and I'm like, wow, this is just a gem. And I think if we can put something down there, it's going to create a great draw.
Great. Okay, any, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You haven't spoken, go.
I think this is a great idea. Steve, I'm hoping your team can just think about it a little bit more about the specifics, aside from the license itself. But the application says 12 to 6. What's on the agenda is 1 to 6, and does that include setup time? Just kind of mapping out what that looks like. I'm really glad to hear that there'll be public safety will be there, but as someone who goes to the farmers market religiously, the parking lots are full, the side streets full, and so even having that hour overlap, and the farmer market, they take down the tents that I've helped them do, so they're not out of there till really 2 with the trucks leaving, and so I just want to make sure that if we do that, it's, we've kind of mapped out what it looks like a little better, and everyone kind of, figures out, maybe we do some extra signage for parking. I know Councillor Smith-Galvin is not a fan of the side street parking. And so, just thinking about what that looks like and what the perimeter, how big. I also, on nice days, there's people who have picnics out there, right? I don't want them to have to go into the beer garden to have their picnic, so we still keep use of the lake available. And then something in the future just to think about, which I've been talking about years, but I love our Thursday jazz. And we've talked about bringing games and, food and a beer garden to that once it starts up next year. So just think about, because I agree with Councillor Dombrowski, I think we need closer to downtown. I'm willing to try this, but I like a little better, and maybe, maybe we can get an email of just the thought process of this, because it is the first time we're doing it too, and I feel like there's a lot of just we'll make it happen, and I just want to hear those specifics.
Can I ask just a brief question? There is a field or a small plot of land that's to the left of the playground. It's kind of in between that house and the playground. Is that private land? Is that owned by the town? Because that might be a good location. It's not directly in the lower common, yet it's still closer to the downtown area. I'm just kind of spitballing.
So by Spalding Playground?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Would find you.
You mean right
I'm
down
just
by
looking
the
at a
lake?
map on Google.
It's pretty small.
Yeah,
It's pretty,
yeah, I'm not so sure that's a
I
good
don't know if
spot.
it would be in your best interest. I think it's hard to find too, so.
Okay.
I think that also sort of slopes down
Yeah.
to the lake. Not all of that land is necessarily kind of usable for this, I would
Right.
think.
I think you're right.
But,
Yes.
Sherry, have you found out if there is gonna be the suicide prevention walk that day?
Yeah, I am still checking, but I don't think it's going to be that day.
Okay.
Okay, good, that's good. I think I don't like the idea of the two events being together. I just don't think it's, a good idea, so that's good. The lower common, one thing that was in the proposal was kids being able to play on the playground and being able to, if it was on the lower common, then that would allow them to do that too. I do like the idea of, I like the idea of the lake, and I like the idea of being closer to the downtown to bringing people out after. But I'm happy with I'm happy with the farmers market area too, so I'm okay with any location.
Councilor Dombrowski?
I think we're going to create a lot of needless congestion by the farmers market location, especially as one event is starting up and while the other is winding down. And if there's, and I understand, I've seen the farmers markets being taken down. It is an effort. There's a lot that goes into that. So why are we going to, try to, get everything clustered right there when we have the lower common, which appears to be, the closer option to the downtown, which is the consensus I'm getting. And also, if it's available, why would we not do that, instead?
So, I'm going to talk out of both sides. The only disadvantage of the lower common that I'm thinking, now that I'm thinking about it, is if you're going to have tables set up, it's not real level like Vetsfield is more.
But if you go down
I
the
wouldn't worry about that.
lower
Okay,
part of the common,
okay.
it's fairly lower. Yeah, it's fairly level. We've done, and plus then people have to be parking, on common or into the downtown, and so
Right.
it at least drives a lot more cars that way. And while we have Chris too, maybe we could also just approve like his liquor license for the place we'll be opening downtown.
Yeah.
On a permanent. Tonight, Chris. See how business is done. You're not going to get that in Stoneham. They're not going to get that.
They may win dodgeball trophies, but I mean.
Yeah, right, exactly. We'll take the brewery, they can take the dodgeball. It's fine.
I mean, Steve, logistically,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, we can make any location work. Am I hearing that the upper common is available now, maybe?
You mean the lower?
Lower common.
The lower common, I'm sorry, lower common.
Is that directed towards me?
Yes, it is. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'm still checking a few things, but yeah, I think it's a strong possibility.
Councillor
Let's
Chines?
put it there
So
then.
could I make a suggestion then that pending the verification that the lower common is available, I'm comfortable with it going there as long as it's not competing with another event. But maybe to the extent that there is something scheduled for the lower common, I would defer, Mr. Mayo, to you and your team to maybe move it to Vetsfield if the lower common's not available. Does
Okay.
that make sense to folks?
Yes.
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 And we can work with Chris to make it work.
I like that especially because if there's an event, it's probably not a Wakefield event. It's probably not Wakefield people. So at least at Vetsfield, we have a lot of Wakefield people that are there. But if there's no event, sure.
Okay, so is that a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve the liquor license application for Idle Hands Craft Sale for September 25th, 2001, at the Lower Common, if it is available, and if not, at Veterans Field.
And let's just get the time straight too, because there has been some
yes.
difference on times. 12 to 6? I mean, I appreciate.
So I'll
the
clarify
concerns
my
about-
motion to say 12 to 6. If we are doing it, obviously, at the Lower Common, we don't have the farmer's market conflict to worry about.
Do I have a
So
second?
12 to 6 open hours, that would still give us the hour for setup prior, right?
Yes.
And the
Correct.
breakdown.
Yes. Councilor Dombrowski?
Could I just add a friendly amendment? Chris, I just think it's really important, and I don't know what your general practice is with these beer gardens, but to just make sure that you have non-alcoholic beverage options that are available for folks, really important piece to this.
Of course. Of course.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yes, excellent point, thank you. Is there a second to the motion with the friendly amendment attached?
Ed seconded.
Oh, you seconded, okay. So we have the motion and motion by Councilor Chines, second by Councilor Dombrowski. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Danahy,
Yes.
Councilor Santos.
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt,
Yes.
Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor May. I'm sure he's still on. Great. And Councilor Dombrowski.
Aye.
And myself, yes. Congratulations, we will see you on the 25th.
Thank
you,
Looking
Chris.
forward to
Thank
it.
you.
We hope to see you all there.
Absolutely.
We'll be there.
Thank you both for being here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 8, we have the Town of Wakefield Master Plan Process Presentation, which is in the packet for those who are watching at home. And I believe Aaron Kokinda is on for that.
Oh, you're
Aaron's
muted. Ed.
muted.
I am on for it, so thank you so much. I won't go through the whole package. Yeah, so we're going to start the master plan process. I think I've heard it a lot since I've started. The big things everyone wants to know about is land use and zoning, housing, transportation and circulation, open space and rec, historic, culture, public facilities, sustainability, climate, economic development. So I think that's going to cover it all during it. Yeah, so we're doing it through MAPC. I think, I think through Vision 2030, we'll just carry it on. I think it's all going to work out. So, sorry. Very nervous.
Oh, goodness, you're doing great.
So I'll jump in. So the master plan looks at the full gamut, right? It doesn't just look at housing, it doesn't just look at climate, it doesn't just look at environment. It looks at a lot of different areas, and it is a huge undertaking, and that's why you kind of do it in chunks. You do a housing production plan, then you do other areas. What's great about the MAPC, number one, is that they're very familiar with our community. They did a great job with Vision 2030. I've heard a lot from the public, and I was on, I think, every one of those public presentations and facilitated some of them, meaning I took notes. That's all I did. But they were really great about moving it along and engaging the public, and that's what this is about. This is about the public engaging and bringing the plan that they want. The other thing that comes in with the MAPC is A, they do this everywhere, and B, there's a lot of grant funds that come with this. So if you were looking at putting this project together and looking at a total of costing the town $120,000, not a huge amount of money, of course, for a master plan, but it's a lot of money. We're probably going to get half of that in grants already, and we could always apply for some more. So to me, I think they know us, they've done a great job, they kind of want to take this on. They have a great a method of kind of self-nominating yourself to be part of this, and I think what this board needs to remember is that this is really the planning board's bailiwick. Erin's just kind of giving us a presentation, what's going to happen, where we're going with it. Erin's done a great job of working with the planning board with this process. So I think this is a home run for us to go forward with this based on our experience. I mean, we could hire a consultant and not know how they are, but I think that Jonathan might want to come in because Jonathan worked very closely with them on Vision 2030, and I think he was pleased. So.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Please.
if I just can add to that, I am very glad to see this moving forward. First of all, with regard to MAPC, they've been excellent to work with Vision 2030. We're still working through the process. We don't have the end product yet, which is something I'll give an update on later at the end of the meeting. But they really have been incredibly responsive. They've taken the time to learn about our community. I think they've done a really thorough job at promoting public engagement in the forums that we had, and so I do think that they're a good partner for this, and they bring the technical expertise as well. I think this also is the natural progression from the Vision 2030 work. I mean, one of the things that we wanted to do once we identified our vision was use that to form a more concrete plan for specific things that we would be focusing on, from a planning perspective going forward. And so the timing works out well for this. It's a natural fit to all of the groundwork that we've laid to Vision 2030. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing this move ahead and seeing the discussion that comes out of the next year or so of activity.
Any other comment? I'll ask a question. So the planning committee has reviewed this and is in agreement with this approach?
I think Erin.
Yeah, I talked to the planning board chair, and he's okay with it. I'm going to do the same presentation tomorrow.
Okay,
So,
great.
Yeah, we wanted to have both boards involved.
Yes, absolutely, and that's, I just want to make sure. Vice Chair Butt.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, but the planning board is who reviews all the nominations and makes selections, so we
Yes,
don't have a voice
yes.
in that?
Exactly. Yeah, this is their project,
Okay,
technically.
okay. And will there be, is it the proposal, Erin, of your proposal of having like 20 to 25 members?
That's part of MAPCs. They just said, like, let's get a diverse group of people that we can, and so yeah. So for the next month, we'll see who nominates himself, and then we'll take it from there.
Great. I have to say, I was just working with MAPC. I was on their external advisory committee for their MetroCom in 2050. I was so impressed with how they looked at everything, different views, really engaged people who, maybe not just really found people to had different perspectives. So I wholeheartedly support this, and thank you, Aaron, for bringing MAPC to the table on this, and Jonathan as well through the previous work.
Sorry, I just got really nervous, so I'm fine.
No, you're great. Councilor Danahy.
Sure, yes, I know that it was successful having the MAPC, and I'm glad that we're going to be working on our master plan. I think that that's really needed. I'm still an advocate of us hiring a town planner so that on the implementation stage is that it's somebody who's going to be able to carry that out through. One thing I saw was that the presentation says January of 2023, but will they have regular updates for us in terms of that would come to town council, or would that only be through the planning board?
I'll jump in and she's, oh, there you go.
No, sorry. Yes, there's going to be constant updates, I think. I think you guys will get updates all the time.
Okay, good. And I love the community involvement of the 25 people advisory board. And, one thing that I've been hearing is a lot of people being concerned about the direction of the town. And so I hope that I saw that there's a plan to advertise through town hall, BB seniors, the library, the senior center. Can we make sure that it's mass promoted wherever we can so we can get a lot of diversity on that committee of a lot of different types of people bringing in different perspectives? Because I think that that's really needed.
Of course, yeah. I've already talked to Jen McDonald about that. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Like even like the email list, if it could go out to everybody, I think that would be a really good idea. And then I was wondering, is that the planning board, it says reviews the applications, but is there any kind of a rubric or anything in terms of what they're looking for? So if people put in their name that they're interested, is that, what is it that's they're looking for?
I just think we just want a diverse group of people.
Okay.
Young people, newcomers.
Yep.
Who here their whole life. So I think I'm going to be the person that kind of goes through that and help the planning board figure that out, who would be the best. But
yeah, so I think it is important that we have people who are new to the community, but also people who have lived in this community and have grown up here, as well as people of different ages. Some of our seniors as well, senior citizens, and people, single people, families, as much diversity as we can. So I think it's great. I just hope that we get people wanting to be on there. Maybe an idea of, I know a lot of people are hesitant to sign up for things because they don't know what is the time commitment. And so I guess maybe clearly stated, I think it was in there how much time was involved, and it didn't seem to be a big time ask, but,
of course.
I would just like to see a lot of people step forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you.
And I think we did find on the Vision 2030, we had many different, it was
good,
really wonderful how you had older people, younger people,
Excellent.
people with kids in
Yeah.
the school system, people that taught in the school system,
It's great.
people that moved here last week, people that have been here. It was really
Awesome.
refreshing to see a great breadth there.
Yeah,
So,
good.
Councilor Kind?
And I was
Oh,
just
then-
going to say,
then we'll go to Councilor
MAPC, did collect contact information for the people who participated in that process. And so they actually do have a good, base of people that might be interested in this. And they did make a pretty concerted effort to try to reach people from different sort of groups and communities in town. That was one of their focuses in identifying sort of community influencers, people that had kind of social connections in different parts of the community, and really trying to leverage those to get people to take the survey and participate in the forums. I have no doubt that they're completely bought into the idea that this needs to be a diverse and representative cohort of people from all walks of life in Wakefield.
I mean, this is a big deal. Our master plan is about the direction of our town, so now is the time for people to have a say in what they want.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what other people were saying relative to this. Having served on the master planning committee, I can say that you really do set the direction and course of your institution or your community or whatever the case might be. The only thing that stands out to me is just the timeline for this. I know with master planning, it's comprehensive. It's a comprehensive look, but it's also a long-term view. But the concerns about housing, which I know will come up a bit in the next item on the agenda, I think are really more immediate than this. And so as much as I appreciate that housing and zoning would be considered in the context of the master plan, the idea of potential final report coming to us well over a year from now seems like too long. And so I don't know to what extent we can, as a council, think more about creating a task force or doing something else that identifies in a more expedited way priorities of the community relative to zoning, or helping people understand zoning bylaws and things that can be done, be it at town meeting perhaps, or through other means, so that we don't continue to have the level of concern that we currently have about housing and development within town, or overdevelopment within town, as a lot of people see it. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of projects that are going to happen between now and January of 2023. And without some better controls put into place, I really think that we're going to run a really serious risk of having a very overdeveloped community by the time this master plan even reaches its final edition of print, much less gets implemented in the years that follow it. So I think that we need to think about how to handle housing somewhat differently, not necessarily saying it can't be a part of the master plan, but I think we got to pull that out, and we really have to deal with that now, because for a lot of folks, the concern is already real with what's currently going up, and that's just going to continue to be an issue as more and more projects are getting approved. So I would just encourage all of us to think about how we can expedite that. Again, I'm suggesting perhaps a task force or something along those lines, some sort of working group that can look at this, because a lot of people, I think, need to be able to better understand the process of, if you want to impact zoning, and if you want to have zoning changes, this is how you do it. And I think that it's a pretty universal concern that we've all heard, to varying degrees from different folks. And I'm not saying that all development is bad, but I do think that overdevelopment is going to fundamentally change the fabric of our community. And I think we all recognize and want to do the right thing in that way. And I think we have to act sooner than what this timeline provides for.
Councilor Chines?
I just respectfully have to disagree with that. I would be highly concerned about pulling housing out of the process for the master plan and doing that separately. I mean, if I look at the master plan topics, Erin, in your presentation, I can't see divorcing that from discussions about land use and transportation and historic preservation and sustainability. And so I am sensitive to the fact that this is a hot button issue in town, which is why I'm glad we're talking about the housing forum in the next agenda item. But I think it's something that we have to address thoughtfully, and I think it's something that we have to address through a comprehensive and holistic process, and not as a one-off issue. And so I would be hard-pressed to find sort of a willingness to go along with this idea that we would somehow divorce housing from the master plan process. I don't think that's the right way to go.
Any other comments? Councilor Dombrowski?
I'm not suggesting that to be divorced. In fact, I said it can be a part of it in master plan. But I do think that we have a more urgent need that needs to be addressed relative to development within town. And it's not a new issue, but it's an issue that is becoming exponentially more concerning for folks. And the idea of just wrapping it into everything else that we talk about from a long-term perspective, a master plan by its very nature is the long view. You're looking out, many years, sometimes you're looking out decades, sometimes you're looking out a generation or some combination thereof. And so it's not like you issue a master plan and then suddenly, within a matter of weeks or months, what is recommended comes into play. It's an expansive vision, basically. And I think that housing development specifically is an issue that we need to deal with sooner than that. And it's not divorcing it from it, but it's recognizing that we have seen over the last 2, 3, 4 years a tremendous increase in the level of development here within town. Look at Foundry. I mean, look at Harvard Mills. Look at how tall that building is. Look at how many more units we're adding. We keep adding, and people are saying, I'm concerned about this. What is happening to our town? And if we don't, we're having a housing forum for a reason, and because it's a more immediate issue. And so I don't think that we're segregating, out housing and not including it or being thoughtful about it in a master plan. But when you have an immediate issue, you have to deal with it. And I think that housing and development is an immediate issue that we have to deal with sooner than the timeline that the master plan calls for, because otherwise we're just kicking that issue down. And then, in January of 2023, best case, we have, a more complete thought process on it for how to go beyond 2023. There's a lot of people that are looking for us to be able to guide them in the right direction, if not be able to take action now. And I think we need to be mindful of that.
I think that perspective, though, underestimates by a lot the time that it takes to plan these projects. I mean, if you look at Foundry Street, if you look at Tarrant Lane, if you look at a lot of the other projects that we've talked about, those really came out of our last master plan, which is now 15 years old. I mean, the rubric, the emphasis on mixed-use development and so forth, that all was developed over the course of a long time. That was 15 years of work. And so I don't think that accelerating the housing part of the master plan by a couple of months materially changes the way the development will happen in the next couple of years in town. I think a lot of that has already been in process. We know the process of going through the Zoning Board of Appeals for a housing development is pretty significant and lengthy. I would caution us not to take this in a piecemeal approach. I think doing so would only lead to a suboptimal outcome for the town.
You're actually making my point by talking about how long development takes from start to finish. So I agree, it is a process, and it is a process that can sometimes take years. So the fact that we would be sidelining taking action on development now, or in a more immediate way, just means that by the time we get a master plan that comes out, and by the time implementation of some thoughts in the master plan go into effect, we're looking at 2024. And then that means, that projects that have already been underway or have, gotten through the current zoning regulations in 2021 and 2022 and 2023 suddenly are being built in 24, 25, 26. Okay. And so I think that the sheer fact that, we're always looking at different years because approvals happen and you can change zoning and bylaws after that, but it's not going to impact that project, even if the project's not completed at that point in time. So I think we need to be really, really cognizant of that. Development is in a lot of ways a standalone issue as much as it's an integrated issue, and I think we can deal with it in both contexts. I don't think it's a competition, but I do think we need to, time is not your friend when you're dealing with development and zoning issues, especially when you have lag times here.
Okay. And I'm going to just cut you off because Councilor Santos had her hand up as well.
In our next item, we're talking about the housing forum. So I don't know why we can't have a robust housing forum, listen to what folks say, and still this master plan goes along beside it. I don't see these as competing. I don't see one as undermining the other. I think the housing forum could educate and instruct those who are part of the master plan onto certain directions. So I don't see it as I don't see them as being in conflict at all.
So maybe, if I may, I agree with you in terms of these two agenda items, Councilor Santos. My only point is, if we are going to make, or if this committee through the master plan is going to make recommendations on housing specifically, I don't think that can be done on a different timeline from the other master plan context. We need to have the housing forum, and I think there's an education component to that and a discussion component to the town that's absolutely important. And that's what we saw in Vision 2030 as well. A lot of what we talked about was related to housing. And I would say we saw people express nuanced opinions that weren't just pro and anti-development, which is one of the other things I think when we get to that final report for Vision 2030 that's going to be really informative. My point is that to the extent that we're talking about the work of the master plan and coming up with that guiding document that will set out a policy agenda going forward, that we just can't do it piecemeal. It's just these things are too interrelated, and so that doesn't preclude us from having these conversations now. But
Absolutely.
you know, the product has to be holistic and it
Well,
has
I
to
want
be
to be clear,
inclusive.
I don't think anybody sees this housing forum as a one-off. I think we
No.
are going to have some robust conversation about housing over the next year that will help inform what ultimately goes into the master plan as well.
I agree.
Anybody else? Do you need a vote? We need a vote on this to move
No,
forward?
it's just an update.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Well, I think we all are going to be charged with helping to find some of these 25 people to help out. So Aaron, Councilor Chines?
I just wanted to add, you were about to thank Erin. I just wanted to also just recognize the work that Erin's done, you know, with the planning board, with the Vision 2030 process. You know, she's been instrumental in both, and I think, you know, really working sort of maybe beyond her original job description and all of the work she's done with the planning board. And so I just, having had the beneficial opportunity to work with her closely over the last several months, I just wanted to recognize her work and thank her for everything that she's brought to Wakefield.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But that doesn't mean you can go, because you still have to be here for the next item on the agenda. You were thanked prematurely.
But Steve, you did bring up the cost of this, and this
Yeah.
will just be part of our ongoing budget process, and then there'll be
Ongoing,
we'll be
yeah,
applying for grants as well?
Yep.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay,
We actually got some money from MAPC already for this,
Yeah.
and
good job,
through the state to get more, so.
great, good. Okay, so I think moving right along to us, we've
Speaking
already
of
talked
housing.
about, housing forum.
Speaking of housing, I'll start and then
go
Erin
ahead.
can jump in. So there's been a lot of conversation around town about housing, and I know you all get emails and phone calls, and I get emails and phone calls and get stopped on the street about it. And there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion or misunderstanding. I mean, it's a complex issue. So people, you know, people haven't been able to really, you know, dive into this, because why would you, right? You just, you know, you have terms, you hear about 40B, you hear terms like inclusionary zoning. What do those mean? And what does it mean to the community? So in talking to the board members and in talking to Erin, another thing on her plate was to put together a housing forum, and this is not meant to be, I don't like this project on ABC Street, it's too big. That's not what this is about. I like the project over here on DEF Street because it's smaller, it's single-family homes. It's not what it's about. It's about to kind of talk about what does housing mean, what does housing mean in the community, what are the current facts, and what does it mean when someone comes in and says they're applying for a 40B project? What does that whole process mean? That's the beginning of that. What is the whole process when they're applying for inclusionary zoning? What does that mean? And we do want to hear from members in the community that have housing challenges. I mean, I really believe the two biggest issues facing us as a community are housing insecurity and food insecurity. And those create a lot of other issues. So I think that there needs to be, everyone needs to step back a little bit and understand all of the issues involved. What does it mean? And then we can go forward and thoughtfully discuss it. So I've seen a number of these, or Erin has gone out and brought me a number of these presentations that have been done in other communities, not dissimilar to ours. North Andover did a wonderful one with was it the Merrimack Housing Partnership, I think, Erin?
Yeah, it was town of North Andover.
North Andover with the Merrimack Housing Partnership, a really good presentation that kind of talked about this from all different aspects. So, that's what we're going to have. This is step one. This is an ongoing conversation. So maybe Erin can go through this a little bit now, but that's kind of setting the tone for this a little bit, because there's a lot of statements that are out there that are made on both sides, whether you're a developer or you're a concerned citizen, that maybe sometimes aren't all in the facts. So why don't you just run through a little bit, Erin, briefly what this is going to be. It's going to be on October 7th at 7 p.m. via Zoom. So we'll be virtual, so there's no reason for anybody to come in anywhere. And I think it'll be a good first step and create some of those discussions. But Erin, why don't you run through that?
Yeah, so North Andover did a really great forum. I think they kind of were going through a hard time just about all the development going on in town. And I watched it, it was really great. And you heard the stories about people that have grown up there or people that want to move back home and they can afford to live there. So they did a great job about storytelling and then also giving like data and facts about housing in Massachusetts. Like if we want to keep being a competitive state, we have to figure out housing. So they did a really good job with that. And so we're we're not pushing housing, we're just putting data out there, so people realize, all the things that you hear might not be true. So traffic, schools, houses in general. So it will be interesting because as Councilor Dombrowski said, everyone's worried about density, but single family homes actually bring in more stuff than some big units. So, it's just putting facts out there. So that's all. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great.
Could I ask Erin, who's going to moderate this? Because I can imagine it's such a touchy subject in town that to control people to not be talking about, I hate this development, I hate that, this town is not like what it used to be. We need someone who can cut that off.
I'll let Steve answer that.
Well, you said the key word, moderate. So we will have presenters from Mass Housing Partnership, and when it does get, or if it does get, our moderator has agreed to moderate it, to just kind of let the flow go through.
Right.
And he has got a pretty good track record, so
Yes, he
we're
does.
counting on him. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
there'll be a 40B expert there. There'll be mass housing
That's
people
great.
there that will kind of talk about the whole issue. So it should be an interesting night.
Yeah, and I think it will be the beginning of the conversation.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Go, Councilor Danahy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, is that I think that's great, that whole educational piece about housing and where we are and why it's needed is important. I think it's also important for people to kind of, to understand what is the process and what is their role in determining how you want to live, what they want too, like in terms of zoning, is that we hear about people, complaining about certain housing, but you know what, it's within the zoning, it's what's voted on at town
Right.
meeting. And so understanding the importance of going to town meeting and when we vote on zoning, what that means and what individual people in this community can have a say. So it's kind of the collective community kind of guiding what the people in our town want.
Right, no, that's a very important point, because any zoning change that is proffered that comes out of whether it's this forum, a master plan, a task force, that's gonna have to go to town meeting. So people have a say, and so it is important that, because oftentimes I'm sure they ask you, well, how is this allowed? Well, went to town meeting and there wasn't, people voted. Well, what do you mean? Well, no, that's what happened, that's our process. So I think it's.
So I think that's really important.
Getting people that they are aware and they know that that's the process will certainly be helpful. So, I agree.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Marla.
And we will promote it broadly.
Absolutely.
Of course. Okay. Any other comments on that? Councilor Dombrowski?
I'll just say that Councilor Dennehy and I had an opportunity, I guess, a few months ago now, along with Aaron Kokinda, to be at a site visit for the site right next to the Knights of Columbus on North Ave. And it was a rather demoralizing experience and basically being told, yep, this is what's going to happen. There's not a whole lot you can do, in essence. You know, I had heard a number of concerns. I believe Councilor Denny had heard them as well from folks. We had raised them, you know, certainly, but there wasn't a whole lot of recognition, I guess you could say, because it was like, all right, well, it's within zoning, it's within the current zoning, it's allowable, it's within the rules. And I think that is the sort of thing that a lot of people are very discouraged by. And I understood this housing forum to be the opportunity to be heavy on the education for the community to understand if you don't like the direction that we're going in. And I think it's okay for people to say, I don't like a 6-story building going into, you know, this area. I think it's an overdevelopment. You know, I think it's okay for people to say that. I'm not sure why we would. I get, you know, we don't want to be nitpicking and being, you know, personal about particular projects, but there are some projects that are profoundly impacting, you know, people's perspectives on what the town is shaping up to be like in the future. And I think we shouldn't be discouraging people from having that kind of candid, you know, dialogue about it. And I think there's a way that it can be done respectfully, but talking about it so, you know, in a way that, well, there was a building that was, you know, 4 stories, but then the next building approved became 5, and the building after that became 6. If you look on North Avenue, for example, you know, we have 600, I guess, North Avenue. That was, I think, that's 3 stories, but then the building next door to it became 4. You know, like, how does that happen? You know, how can we try to avoid things like that in the future? So I think it's okay to cite, you know, cases in point with that, because a lot of the discussion, and I think of a lot of the interest in development, is related to better understanding zoning. And I don't think we should be discouraging people from, you know, citing specifics if it helps others better understand the context of how things come into being within town. So I think that that's an important piece to it. I don't think we should be discouraging that as a part of this forum or this ongoing dialogue that we're going to be having with the community.
Councilor Chang?
Just a question. To what extent are we engaging with, you know, the chairs and the members of the Planning Board or Zoning Board of Appeals and thinking through the forum? A lot of, I think, the housing developments that people might react to obviously go through a process that falls outside of our purview.
We certainly don't want them to comment on anything in front of them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So where they're certainly welcome when we invite them to be part of this, we don't want them to be on like a panel to talk about these things.
Yeah. No, I guess I'm asking
and
more
nor
from,
will we be on a panel, really.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm asking more from the standpoint of, you know, to the extent that we're talking about the way sort of the process works of, say, a 40B development going through, I guess, are we leveraging sort of the expertise that we have on those boards?
We actually have a 40B expert coming in, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to Ed's point, if somebody says, how does this happen? You can use it as an example to walk through what the zoning is or what the process is.
Correct.
So I think that that's a fair request.
I was going to say, even just educating people that, you know, this is the set of hearings that the ZBA has on a project. They stretch out over X number of months and focus on, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G issues. You know, that level of education, I think if we're talking about how do you potentially influence and know about the process becomes important.
Yeah, I think.
And sorry, can I just chime in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
CBA with Crescent Hill, they have MHP, Massachusetts Housing Partnership. They have a consultant helping them right now, like trying to like talk through the process. So I think they have that working with them. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Councilor Danahy?
And I was just going to say, I think understanding 40B is really important because I think that a lot of people, it's such a confusing idea and how things get placed. But I think it's also development that's not 40B too, is that, you know, how zoning plays in the zoning laws. So I just hope that it's a comprehensive kind of like, this is, you know, more of a local, I hope it's more of a local forum rather than a kind of global why we need housing forum, and more about this is what's happening in our community. And here's the zoning, and here's how things happen in the process, and here's why this is, you know, why 40B exists is important for people to understand about this, again, being competitive in the state. It's so expensive. So many people are leaving the state because it is so expensive. So I get that, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to, that it's going to be local.
So can I also chime in too? I think, and I'm just defending Wakefield before I even start here. So I think my predecessor, if you will, did the mixed-use district, 2,500 feet from the rail station. The state now is saying, I don't know when they're starting it, Steve might know more than me, like you need by right to allow mixed use, right, Steve?
Right, you have to have a by right area around your train station, where there can be multifamily housing by right.
So
But
that's
there are no guidelines on that yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, that's coming through too, so that's out of our control.
Right.
But that's good to include in the housing forum. I
Correct.
mean, it's so complex that.
Right. Yeah, whereas I think our approach was much better, frankly, than the state's, and I said this to our delegation, in that by right means you don't need to go through a special permit process where things may fit into the neighborhood better, okay? So the state law came out, and you wouldn't want someone to tear down a larger building and be able to build whatever they want by right without going through a special permit process, which can be a little bit better normally. So I think
just defining things like by right,
exactly.
what is a special permit
Yes.
process. I mean,
absolutely.
Even those of us who are pretty steeped in this, it's very complex.
Yeah. So this is the first start on that, to kind of start that from there.
Councilor Shines.
Just one other thought about sort of the forum, or probably more even future discussions. But as we think about a lot of zoning rules, the history behind a lot of zoning rules is really exclusionary, and certainly that probably is the case in a community like Wakefield's as well. And so I think as we have these discussions, also talking about housing policy and the intent behind some of the state rules that exist, to promote equity in housing, I think is another important framework that I want to make sure we're mindful of. Because again, the history of zoning is not always a positive one, and in fact, in many cases locally, not necessarily just in Wakefield, but in Massachusetts is one that has pretty negative consequences. And so I hope that's another thing that we consider as we have this discussion, and as we talk about the education of the community around the history and sort of intent behind the housing laws that exist today.
Good. So I don't think there's any vote on this.
No.
Just encouraging everybody to attend, and we'll make sure that we get the notice out to the public to encourage broad participation. Anybody else? I'm not sure I looked at the screen. Okay, so we're going to move on to item number 10, traffic advisory recommendation, traffic calming and parking restriction policy. I believe we have, is it Lieutenant? Anderson. Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everybody. Can I actually share my screen? I have a brief PowerPoint to aid me. If not, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, WCAT should be able to help you with that.
I'll try the share screen button, see if it doesn't work just yet.
And just for people in the public, the actual policy is in our packet as well.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
It's coming, yep.
There we go.
All right, perfect. So I'm before you tonight to discuss a traffic calming and parking restriction policy, but I figured it was about time to probably give you guys a little bit of an overview of what we do at Traffic Advisory. Sometimes we have a pretty heavy agenda that ranges from complaints to development reviews and things like that. So I think it's probably good for the public to know a little bit about what we do and update them and kind of segue into what this policy is. So our town engineer, Bill Renault, is on with us as well. He may hit on a couple of points from an engineering perspective. But basically, over the last year or so, Bill and I have discussed coming up with a structured process for some of these traffic calming complaints that we get throughout town. And we get a lot of them, and some of them are definitely warranted. Others we have to look at through a traffic study and take a more deliberate approach. And others are, they're complaints, but they may not really hold a lot of weight. People may think they have a speeding problem in their neighborhood, and we go out and we find that traffic's traveling at the speed limit. It just looks really fast for a residential road, but it's nothing that we'd actually employ any type of change to the roadway or anything like that. So we really wanted to create a policy that helped us to have a more streamlined process, help the town make some data-driven decisions, because I think, as we've learned at Traffic Advisory, data-driven decisions are probably the best decisions we can make when it comes to traffic, and they're not without their flaws, but it definitely points us in the right direction. So I think as a town to rank some of those decisions and have a process to do that, I think would be a great help for us in Wakefield, and kind of just review and follow up too. I think some things we do in town, and we may kind of lose track of, where is that at today? And this would have a mechanism to allow us to go back, revisit, where are we at with that parking restriction? Is it working? Do we need to tweak it? So it would point us in that direction to revisit it and see if it's actually working. Let me see if I can get the presentation going for you. There we go. So who are we at Traffic Advisory? We're made up of the Wakefield DPW, Joe Conway, Director, Bill Renault, our Town Engineer. We have a representative from the Wakefield Commission on Disability Issues. She helps us with primarily with handicap parking and things of that nature, accessibility issues. Town Administrator. We have Captain Hudson from the Fire Department, who's our Traffic Signal Department person. We have the fire departments frequently in attendance at our meetings. We have an independent engineer from VHB, Matt Keeley, who's been part of our committee for quite a long time, does an excellent job, gives a great perspective from somebody outside of the town, which is good. We have 2 resident representatives to provide their perspective, and then I am on the committee also. So what do we do? Well, primarily what we do is, we do a lot of development review for the Board of Appeals. They ask us to look at the traffic studies. They ask us to make some recommendations and kind of give our thoughts on development that they are currently reviewing. So that's a big piece there, and that's where our engineers really come into play and kind of help us sift through these traffic studies and make some recommendations that go back and forth, maybe over the course of a couple of meetings, to develop those traffic studies and ask some clarifying questions about, how long the study was conducted for, and maybe some areas of increased focus. They may look at, the neighboring 3 or 4 intersections. We may want them to expand that study further out, so we can look at the impact of the overall neighborhood and not just intersections nearby, sightline visibility, sight stopping distances, things like that. Traffic restrictions, that would be stop signs and things like that. Parking restrictions, that's one of our frequent complaints, is that residents would like to see different parking restrictions in the neighborhood. It could range from resident parking only to time restrictions, 1-hour parking, resident only, no parking here to corner, things like that. Handicap parking, our representative helps us with that. Town concerns, so just anything that comes from town council or the DPW, or really any town department, we put that on the agenda and look at that. And citizen concerns is probably, I would rank it a pretty close second to the development review that we get. And that's probably why we're here today, is to talk about how can we take our citizen concerns and really look at them and give them a structured process, the ability to have sufficient neighborhood impact. I think in my experience with Traffic Advisory for the last about 2 years, some of the decisions that we've made that have been the most impactful and have been the most successful have really come from neighborhood groups that we've met with that really tell us what's going on in the neighborhood, what they think would be best. I've conducted site visits with them. We've gone back and forth, had them at meetings, and I think it's lessened the ripple effect of us making a change to traffic advisory, thinking we're making a good change, and then the other half of the neighborhood that wasn't present at the meeting or didn't know about it says, hey, wait, now that's changing X, Y, and Z in our neighborhood, and we didn't know about that, and now it's an issue. So I think the biggest impact and the best impact has been when we've had, like anything else, a lot of different perspective and had good, solid neighborhood input. So a little bit about what we do. This is from the website. Our goal is to create a safe environment for the motoring public, bicyclists, and pedestrians. We evaluate current conditions, recommend changes that improve safety. We work in partnership, as I said, with the Zoning Board of Appeals to analyze traffic impact studies for proposed building projects. And we're also tasked with improving parking conditions, recommending changes to restricted areas, working with the Commission on Disabilities to provide handicap parking, and things of that nature. So what is traffic calming, this policy that we have before you? So traffic calming is, it's not new. It's something that's been around for many years, and we had it broken down into 2 stages. The traffic calming is a method of employing specific measures aimed at reducing speeding, aggressive driving, high levels of vehicular traffic through local neighborhoods. So some of those could be as simple as Joe Conway at the DPW having his guys change some pavement markings, add some signage. The police department might do some directed traffic enforcement. We might do some type of public education or awareness. And finally, our speed trail, which is probably the most requested piece of equipment that I think we provide because everybody wants that feedback. Some of the enhanced measures that involve physical modifications to the roadway are things like we saw with the Envision plan with bulb outs, curb extensions, creating a road diet to slow traffic down, things like that. Center islands, raised crosswalks, realigning the intersections, roundabouts sometimes are more successful in areas where intersections aren't. Adding sidewalks, which is obviously very costly, but that's a big request. Speed bumps and things like that. So that's on our stage 2, kind of more expensive and definitely something I think the town want to process to rank and see where they're going to spend the money. It's kind of a flow chart of the process. So pretty much a citizen would say, hey, there's a problem in our neighborhood. We're concerned about whatever it happens to be. Could be speeding cars or an issue with an intersection. They think it needs a stop sign. They'd submit an application, and by that, it's nothing labor intensive, just basically outlining the concern. We would review the application, identify the affected area. At that point, the applicant would demonstrate some local support saying, hey, we think that this is really an issue in our neighborhood. And then that would prompt us to collect data, which can be kind of costly. And, I think a traffic study is definitely warranted in some neighborhoods, but it's not something that we want to do every time a complaint is generated. From there, the Traffic Advisory Committee would review the data that we get. We'd make a recommendation. That recommendation could be a stage 1 measure. So we might add some signage or speed trailer or roadway markings, things like that. The big piece, like I said, is a 6-month follow-up where we kind of go back and do some data collection again and see, is this working? Is what we did with the stage 1 measure, is that enough? And that might be a cheap way out where some roadway markings, some paint did it. A sign might have done it. Or we might look at it and say it didn't do anything. So now we might want to go forward with one of those stage 2 measures that are a little more costly, but may or may not be necessary. At that point, we'd have a neighborhood site meeting because it would involve some significant change, whether it be installation of sidewalks, road diet, things like that. We would identify available funding. So where's the funding going to come from for that? And we would move to design and construction. And from that point, after the design and construction, we would review that again to see how it's working out. We developed a criteria. Now, this criteria doesn't mean that if you don't hit all these points that we wouldn't consider it. But obviously, if you have an 85th percentile speed where everyone's traveling at or maybe a couple of miles an hour over the speed limit, and you have a very low traffic volume, we may not we may not be doing anything too expensive there, that's for sure. Versus a speeding issue with high traffic volume, no sidewalks, things like that. That's definitely something that the town might rank differently and look at spending a little bit more money on an issue like that. And at any given point, we may have 3 or 4 of these concerns in the fiscal year that the town wants to look at and decide, what's really the priority. And I think in some cases it would be, speed, traffic volume, near a school zone, no adequate sidewalks, things like that. So this would help the town kind of decide what should we focus our money on first. Kind of the same thing, but a little bit less intense for parking restrictions. So we get a lot of requests for, I don't think there should be parking on one side of the street. Well, the problem becomes, how do you restrict parking on one side of the street without adequate, neighborhood input? And because somebody's not going to be able to park their car in front of their own house. So I can't make that decision. So they would report that there's a problem, whether it be the roadway be too narrow, and they don't think that there should be parking on both sides of the street, or they want a time restriction because people are using their street to take the commuter rail, which is less of an issue now, but definitely was pre-COVID. So they would report it to us. We'd review it. I'd probably do a site visit at that point, and then we'd see if there was some neighborhood support for any of the recommendations. After that, we'd do a site visit and evaluate how things are working out if we do decide to move forward with restrictions that would obviously go before town council. Let me go to policy for 1 second. I think that's pretty much it for the presentation. I think Bill, if you're on, if you have a couple things to follow up with.
Yeah. I think the other piece is just to kind of highlight is cost. So a lot of those stage 2 improvements have real dollars assigned to it. I mean, they can be in excess of $25,000 a pop. So, as we evaluate these things, that's one of the main pieces I think that I wanted to see in here. Aside from the data-driven decisions, as I'm sure you folks all know, that's a big thing in my office for sure, as I've presented on other initiatives. But yeah, the financing and making sure that is identified. So, if we understand that there is a need in certain locations, we can go after grants, and we have done that in certain instances, or at least come to town meeting as as the traffic advisory committee, as a series of a handful of projects potentially going forward. That's how we would kind of envision this thing going down the road. So I think that's a big piece, because people would say, hey, let's just throw a crosswalk in location of A, B, or C. Well, that's terrific, but you still have to put 2 curb ramps in on either side. Those cost about $7,000 a piece. So we may get 10 crosswalk requests in a given year. So I mean, you can do the math right there. So that jumps up pretty quickly and gets into real dollars very, very, very quickly. So I think that's the only thing I'd really add. Joe and I have worked together on this. This is very similar to a policy that I had in the town of Concord when I worked there. Essentially we took that as a model, and then Joe carved out some certain pieces, and we had a good long conversation on it. So I have some experience using this as a as a process that we thought worked very, very successfully there. So I'm pretty confident it would work pretty successfully here as well. So be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Bill said too. We've been working on this for probably, I'd say, about a year plus, and we looked at, as Bill said, policy from Concord, policy from Brookline. There were a few other towns that might not have been really similar in size, or cities that didn't really match what we had here, but little bits and pieces of their policy we took from there. We had, I want to say, 3 public meetings on this. We got some great feedback from the public at those meetings about changing some of the requirements for public participation, which we thought was good, because we obviously want to make this an easy process, not a challenge for anybody to get change in their neighborhood, but obviously have some solid neighborhood support too for some of these not only costly but some impactful changes, especially on the parking end. Parking, as we know, that can definitely create some issues and a big ripple effect to other neighborhoods if we start changing parking restrictions in one neighborhood. Spillover goes to another neighborhood, and that creates some problems. So we wanted to make sure that was in there, but not so restrictive as to make this process difficult to get any change done in town. So that's pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Chines?
Thank you, and thank you very much, Lieutenant Anderson, Mr. Renault, for the work that went into this. I really applaud the the thoughtful approach that you take, the research that you put into it, and the effort to come up with a process that I think is clear for residents, but also assures that we're doing the right due diligence. I had a couple of specific questions, so I ask you in advance just to bear with me just for a minute as I go through these. The first thing I wanted to ask about was just the rationale behind some of the criteria, the minimum criteria listed in step 1, specifically the focus on residential roadways and roadways where the posted speed limit was not greater than 30 miles per hour. Could you talk a little bit about the decision-making there and why specifically those criteria were recommended for the policy?
Yeah, sure. So Bill can probably answer this a little bit better than I can from an engineering standpoint, but I can tell you that those roadways that have a speed limit over 30 miles an hour, you're getting into a totally different roadway, arterials, collectors, and we may be restricted as to what we can do with those roadways because of the makeup of what those roadways are intended for, to basically distribute traffic to other parts of town and create more of a ripple effect for, not only the neighborhoods around it, but business in town. It might impact, truck exclusion routes that have already been approved, and there has to be a secondary roadway, an alternate direction for those trucks to travel through town, so they're not going down residential roads. But Bill, I'm sure, has a little bit more on that end.
Yeah, no, I think those are pretty much the key points. The reason for the 40 is most of these traffic calming initiatives, if the road is already posted as a 40 mile an hour roadway or something over 30 miles an hour, as you mentioned, what we run into is that those are going to be on our arterials and collectors. And usually in that situation, we're trying not to necessarily have either crosswalks or some type of chicane or shrinking of the roadway width in that section, because we're trying to essentially move traffic from A to B, and you start to really impact the use of the road. So that's what the rationale was when that was created a long time ago, and we elected to kind of continue that through this proposal here with you. And then as for the residential component, really what we found is it's again back to the arterial and collector component. So if you think of the Envision project, it's a really good example. We essentially did that as a town initiative. So anything on these larger and more well-used roadways are going to be evaluated as part of our paving program, and we'll be looking at enhancements and doing those things when they're appropriate. So we don't necessarily need if a resident highlights that to us as something, obviously we would be taking that into account. As I'm repaving, I'm also looking into those things as part of the, just our typical due diligence and public outreach that we do as part of the road repaving program. And then the last one is that, really what we found is that in neighborhoods specifically, it's a very finite area of who's going to be affected, right? So if you think about it, if you have speeding and it's in a small neighborhood, and we're electing to go with some type of chicane, so there's a slalom approach that goes through with some bump outs into the road. Well, those are going to be put in front of somebody's house. They should be aware of that as an opportunity, as a situation, and the whole neighborhood needs to see this as an issue for this to be made a decision that we would want to do. I don't think we would just do that, based on the request of one resident that's highlighted a problem. So, there's a few factors that kind of weighed into that, and I'm hoping that answers your question, Councilor Chines. Is that clear?
It does. Maybe just a couple of follow-ups on that.
Sure.
As we talk about a residential roadway, I guess, how are we defining that? I mean, are we talking about roads in like areas that are zoned for residential use, or I guess I can see sort of the definition of that being a little fuzzy, and so I just want to understand what we're including in this policy and excluding, just so that we're not creating an unintended consequence of not giving, individuals an opportunity to raise a concern of an issue, on a street that maybe isn't residential per se, but still has a lot of pedestrian traffic or other potential issues.
Yeah, so actually, Bill, I'll just jump in quick. So in the policy, it's a town-maintained road, so it has to be a public way.
Yep.
It has to be 600 feet long. Majority of it has to be residential, and the posted speed limit not greater than 30 miles an hour. So I can tell you that pretty much all of my complaints that I've received since I've been part of traffic advisory have all been residential roads. They may not have all fit that exact criteria, but they've all been residential roads. And I think that, like Bill was saying, some of the changes that are going to be made, we wouldn't do on some of the roads that are over 30, which there aren't many in town, but like Bill said, they're arteries, they're connectors, they're roads that we may do something else on. And this policy isn't to restrict anybody from bringing something to our attention, but it's a way and a mechanism for residents to streamline their request to us for what we receive as the most requests, which is in these type of roads, 30 miles an hour or less, residential roads. That's really that's a majority of the complaints that we receive. So how do we streamline this process, and how do we help the town make some data-driven decisions on how to spend the money, and then have us revisit it, so we have a structured process to go back and check and see if these are working. So this isn't to exclude some of those other concerns, but just to create a structured process for our residents to go through.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And when I read this, my concern was what I wouldn't want to see is if someone raises a legitimate concern on a 40-mile-an-hour road that we'd just ignore it. It sounds like what we're saying is we'd have sort of a separate, probably more sort of mediated pathway for to look at that, just given the other complexities around that, than we'd be talking about here in terms of soliciting feedback and agreement from other residents and so forth. Is that a fair way of thinking about this?
Yes. Yeah. That's pretty much what we do.
Great. Okay. And then just the second question I had, and this is stepping forward to step 5, the data review. One of the things I noticed on the criteria was sort of the lack of points assigned if the 85th percentile speed was in that 0 to 7 mile per hour range. And I just wanted to get an understanding there. Certainly, obviously, if people are speeding at a higher level than that, that should get more points. But I didn't know if this was an area where you considered at least some point value for some of that lower level speeding if the 85th percentile is falling above the posted limit.
Yeah, that would be, Bill can touch a little bit on the 85th percentile speed and what that means in the engineering world, but basically it means 85% of traffic is traveling at least that speed or higher, it's a pretty big threshold. And that doesn't mean that we wouldn't look at it per se, but it may not raise to the level that we're going to be considering making some major changes to that road. So that might be something where I deal with it on a more informal level at the police department, have the speed trailer go out, or have an officer monitor it for a week or so and see, exactly what the speeding problem is like there, and maybe just having a police cruiser parked on the street at peak hours is enough to impact that. So this is more to see at the end of the day, during the fiscal year, if we have 4 different potential projects and we have one where 85% of the vehicles are traveling 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, and we have another one where 85% are traveling 11 miles an hour over the speed limit, that may be where the town wants to spend its money. That's really where the criteria comes into play.
Yep, no, and I don't disagree with that whatsoever. I guess my concern was just in seeing that it felt to me like there should be some value assigned to sort of the lower level of speeding. If 85% of vehicles are speeding, 5 miles and over the limit, that's 35 is a different speed than 30. Given that we're talking about 30-mile-per-hour roads, and so maybe on that piece would encourage some point value. Obviously, not to the same extent that it would be for the higher speeds, but I still think there's some value. If we're seeing the 85th percentile be above the posted speed limit at any level, I hope that's something we'd look at.
No, I completely agree, but that's not the only criteria either. So the volume is another one. So if we have, an average traffic volume of 1,000 vehicles per day, there's 5 points there. If there's no sidewalk on either side of the street, now they're up to 10 points. So even though you may get 0 points for that 0 to 7 mile per hour depending on the makeup of the roadway, you may you may have some other points for some other issues, school zones and things like that, but I definitely understand your point.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it again, and thank you for all the effort that's gone into pulling this together.
No problem.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Lieutenant Anderson and Mr. Renaud as well. This is, and a really well thought out, and I love that you pulled, the best of other communities and put it together into one. Best practice is awesome. On step one, where you were talking about number 3, the majority of the property adjoining the roadway is residential. When I went through this policy earlier, I was thinking about that and like what that would represent. And some streets came to mind, like Tuttle, for example, or like Four Corners. So it seems like within our town there probably are some streets that, there might be like majority business, but technically we'd still want the same kind of opportunity. So would there be any harm in just not being as so explicit about with number 3 being residential? I just think there are going to be probably some exceptions that and I agree with you, Bill. A lot of what you talked about, the major roadways, obviously, down Main, those sorts of things. Plan for that. Envision spends a lot of time on that, but like Tuttle, again, stuck out to me as one. That's probably one where we don't probably put as much emphasis on as like some of the other like major thoroughfares, but. Technically under a reading of this, can they, lodge a concern? Not technically under this process. It doesn't really meet the criteria per se. I just don't want to dissuade people from, reaching out.
And I don't want to dissuade anyone from filing or expressing any complaint whatsoever that has to do with traffic. This is just to try to help us streamline a process for a majority of the complaints. But if there was something that didn't quite fit the criteria, and maybe Jim McDonald will, if this does get adopted by town council, can put out that, if your specific complaint doesn't fit this criteria, this is to streamline the process and to help us make some data-driven decisions. But for those one-off streets, we can definitely put that on the agenda and look at it at traffic advisory. But this is to try to help us, rank and kind of sift through a number of complaints and different decisions. So there's definitely no harm in adding that to the policy, but there's no restriction whatsoever with anybody coming to me directly. Just some people may not want to come to the police for a number of reasons and figure they're bothering us, which isn't the case. This is something they can fill out and do, and it goes to the town and we review it, and it's going to definitely help us kind of sift through where a majority of the complaints lie. But there's no harm in putting that in there, and there's no harm in not putting it in there and just making sure that the public knows they can reach out to us. If it doesn't seem like it fits that criteria, I would rather them reach out and know about a problem and get their perspective.
So I guess I'm going to encourage, either just striking number 3 or adding like a number 5 that says, the majority of the property, being, business or commercial in certain instances or something like that. Just because if someone's like, going through reading, I just want them to know that. And then the other point on that was, I think this is a great opportunity to really have this well integrated into our website so that, it's ease of use. You're talking about, being able to kind of like build this out so it's user friendly and also engaging with the community. And I can picture a lot of folks probably going on, I know you mentioned the an email address and the phone number, but I can picture a lot of people, if it's visible on the website in such a way that people can kind of click, hey, I've got a concern, fill out, at least the conditional, request based upon the criteria, if it meets it, to go to the next step, et cetera. But the more that we can have this kind of built into the website, I think the better and more streamlined it'll be for everybody, including traffic advisory, going through these.
No doubt.
Great.
Yeah, we have an online system that we use in engineering for our permit system, which actually we could dovetail and tweak into this. It's very modular and modifiable, so we can definitely do something like that. We could hit that pretty easily, I think. So
I think that'd be a great value add, I think, to it, across the board. But again, great work to you both and the entire, TAC. I think this is phenomenal, and I think it's great for our residents to be able to have this as an access point. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm going to give mine. Just quickly, I know in multiple places you say there's posted speed limits. I've always found that there are very few speed limits posted in town.
You are right about that, and something that we educate people on quite frequently in traffic advisory. It's probably like you guys were discussing about 40B and things that the Board of Appeals looks at. So typically, if you go back to the driver's manual and when you were studying for your driver's license, if it's not posted, it's 30 miles an hour in a thickly settled area. If it's outside of that, it's a 40. If it's on a divided highway, you have your 50-mile-an-hour zone. So we're actually not supposed to post speed limits in the black and white format unless it's a special regulation. That's when you see the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs. Those are special regulations that town council has adopted in conjunction with Mass DOT's approval. Or sometimes what they were aiming at years ago was trying to do like an advisory sign. You'll see some orange advisory signs that it's more of a recommendation for an upcoming curve and things like that. But yeah, you're right. They really seems like some streets have old signage from years ago, but really it shouldn't be posted unless it's a special regulation.
Okay.
And if there's no speed limit posted, you go back to the basic speed, which is 30 miles an hour in most places.
Okay.
At least.
That's what I get for getting my driver's license in Maryland. So in terms of the criteria where it says 5 points for no sidewalk, 10 points for school zone or pedestrian generator, does that count within a certain range of the MBTA or public transportation?
I would definitely say that pedestrian generator bill would be within.
He would definitely be. Yeah, but I guess the intent is for the roadway itself, not necessarily, so there would have to be a pedestrian generator on the street. So a school would be one. I think like a park would be a good example. Some type of, any type of group home or thing of that nature.
Okay.
Town building, something else. Those types of things is what we envisioned.
Okay. And then my only other one is just a suggestion. I love all the lists of the stage 2 measures. There might be opportunities too for pilot projects. I know the Safe Streets Working Group has been talking a lot about street calming, and there's been some interesting things done in Melrose. So perhaps there are things like bike lanes or setting it up for a couple of days to see how it works or something like that. I do hope that eventually we are doing the MAPC bike and pedestrian study, and maybe there's some overlap there as well in terms of ideas. But this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything else on this? So we can vote to accept this policy as written, I think. Ed or Jonathan, did you want to make any changes to suggestions to number, sorry, now I lost it. To step 1?
Actually,
go ahead.
Madam Chair, I would just say for step 1, I would be comfortable if it was all right with Lieutenant Anderson and Bill to just add like a number 5. The majority of the property adjoining the roadway is commercial under certain circumstances.
Yeah, we can revise that section to have something to that. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's not a problem.
Okay, so I have a motion as Councilor Dombrowski? Yes,
Sorry,
Councilor Tynes.
I would actually maybe propose one other edit. On the traffic speed criteria, I would assign 5 points to the 0 to 5 miles per hour. I know that it's a little bit of a nitpicky thing, but I do think if the speed limit is 30, then if the 85th percentile speed is over 30, there should be some consideration of that, recognizing again that, we are assigning more points to higher speeds on other roadways.
But the 0 to 7 miles per hour?
Correct.
Okay.
So then the schedule would be 5 points for 0 to 7,
Yes.
10 for 8 to 10, and 15 points for above 10 miles per hour.
Gentlemen, what do you think of that? Is that okay?
I would just be concerned with having, 31 mile an hour, 85th percentile speed on a road, and then, having a neighborhood demand that there be some significant change to the roadway, or really at that point, any significant change. That would be my only. Maybe we could break that up somehow, because I just think.
Yeah. What if we went to say 35? Well, it's not 35, but say 5 miles an hour over. So 5 to 7 would get the 5 points. Is that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, my concern is not with the 1 mile an hour over. It's the 5. I think that is
Yeah, right.
significant in a 30 zone.
That's the intent of it, is
Yeah.
just basically to not have the 1 mile an hour, 2 mile an hour over be a, kind of a deciding factor on making an improvement there, so.
I'm fine with that. That works good.
Okay, great.
So, Madam Chair, then I think we'd be looking at 0 to 4 miles per hour at 0 points.
Yes.
5 to 7 at 5.
Right.
And then otherwise is written.
So that's part of the motion for step 5, and step 1 is an inclusion of commercial consideration, majority commercial.
That's correct. So
Okay.
given that we haven't actually made a motion, I will move to
Why don't you do that for me?
adopt the policy with the 2 changes discussed. One is adding number 5 as stated by Councilor Dombrowski in step 1. And the second is amending the traffic speeds under the criteria in step 5 as discussed.
Okay, so motion by Counselor Chine, second by Counselor Santos. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Myself, yes. And Peter May has had to leave the meeting. Okay. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Latonya.
Thank
you, Madam Chair.
Wonderful.
Everybody.
It's great.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us. Okay, item number 11 is discussion regarding outdoor dining. This is a follow-up to the public comment that we had, gosh, probably late July, early August. I just wanted to bring it back if there's any discussion. I will just say that personally, I think given where we are with COVID and Delta, we need to do everything we can to keep the businesses and particularly the restaurants open. And so I personally am in favor of not changing the policy vote that we took and we have in place, but I do want to open it for discussion if there is any. Councilor Santos.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you, especially with the Delta variant and simply the vibrancy of downtown. So after the walk, the ALS walk, just walking downtown and seeing the outdoor dining full and people were very happy to be outside. I think the Northeast should get used to outdoor dining like Europe does and a lot of other parts of the country. So I understand there's concerns with parking. I've never not been able to park off of the town on side streets, or I'm not that concerned for right now enough that we should take away outdoor dining or shorten the season.
Any other discussion? Councilor Danahy?
I would just have to concur with what you both said, and I think it's just a cost-benefit analysis, is that I think that the benefit far outweighs any kind of cost associated, and I'm all for continuing it.
Yep. And in off hours, people can use the town hall. There's parking back there. We probably still have some wayfinding signs to do around parking, but in the meantime, hopefully we can use that area. Yes.
I agree. The only comment that I would make is I have heard some concerns, particularly with some of the churches for services and accessibility, I think, for people who maybe have some mobility issues. And so I don't know if there's something that we could look at to maybe allow, like, temporary handicap spots in front of, like a church, when they have a service running, or something that maybe helps just ease the burden, maybe for folks that aren't able to walk as many of us are. Again, I certainly don't want to change the policy while we think through that, but I would ask Mr. Mayo maybe if that's something that you and our friends on the Traffic Advisory Council could think about, just to assure that we do have accessibility, for some of those sort of off-peak times where at least I've heard some level of concern.
Okay, sure. If you could let me know where.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Well, there should be no reason they can't put a temporary sign there, like we do at the Galvin Middle School for Election Day, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of having in mind. Again, just while we're in this space where we do want to keep people outdoors, we do want to make sure we're keeping people safe given the Delta variant. But, recognizing that, a lot of us are able to walk, some people can't, and we certainly don't want to, put barriers in place for them to be able to go about their business and doing the things that they want to do.
That's a good point. Anyway, Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share everyone's sentiment that I feel strongly that the outdoor dining is working. There is a vibrancy in the downtown that we haven't had before, which is great to see. I also, I've not seen issues with unavailability of parking. I've not heard that from businesses either, with the exception of some businesses during the construction phase of Albion Street. There had been some time when the street was torn up, and that's obviously resolved itself. I'm working with Aaron Cook and the two on the piece of promoting the fact that we have this great public-private partnership that Mr. Mayo played a huge role in with the Wakefield Daily Item. So we have a significant amount of parking in that parking lot that's available, public parking that's available for people as well. And I think by all accounts, parking enforcement hasn't found, that there have been, an absence of available spots. And so I think what we have is working. People may have to modify their parking habits just slightly. If you're going to someplace in the middle of downtown, then maybe you may want to park in Albion and walk the quarter block to get around the corner. But I think that this is such an important lifeline for our businesses that that we should just stay the course as we are.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, so I don't think there's any vote needed on this because we're going to let stand the existing vote. Item number 12, regular town meeting. I think we can take A, B, and C together. I'm looking down at my lawyers.
You can.
I'll read them out.
Sure. And what we, got a lot of comments from the town council and from the townspeople that people seem to enjoy the Saturday town meeting better than coming back after work Monday night and Thursday night. We will have accommodations inside and outside, as we have in the past. Unfortunately, I was hoping that we wouldn't have to do that, but that's the way it is. And that'll be on Saturday, November 6th at 8 a.m. at the Field House at the high school. That's
Okay.
the recommendation.
So let's take the motion, and then if we have any discussion, we can do that. So the motion would be to set the date for regular town meeting Saturday, November 6th, 2021 at 8 a.m. in the Field House at the high school, to open the town meeting warrant as of today, September 13th, 2021, and to set the close date of the warrant for October 8th, 2021 at 12 p.m. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So moved by Counselor Santos, second by Counselor Chines. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
And myself, yes. Okay. Item number 12, refer zoning article to planning board. Steve, you
Yeah, I
want
can
to walk
give
us through
you-
this one?
Walk you through this one, and Tom Mullen is here in case my legal training is rusty, or my legal is rusty. Basically, there's a process in requesting a zoning change. And one of the first steps in that is that the requested article is referred to the planning board in this case, by the town council. I think the key word here is the town council shall refer it to a request for a zoning change to the planning board. We're not here to discuss it, we're not here to do anything with it. That's up to the planning board, who will hold public hearings and what have you. So my advice will be that we did have a request from a person who owns property in Wakefield to refer an article to the zoning board, to the planning board, to repeal zoning bylaw 190-31H, which makes it, you need to get permission from the zoning board to build within 50 feet of a running stream. That is currently also under the Conservation Commission. So this gentleman is asked to remove that completely and go with the Conservation Commission, I guess. But we just presented to you what was presented to us. We make no, we're not really here to tell the story, right?
Yeah, if I may,
Please.
Madam Chair. What's novel here is that we generally see an article supported by a petition. And so we would see typically a petition of 10 or 100, depending on the nature of the town meeting, residents asking the board to place an article on the next special or annual town meeting. Here, there is only one person And technically, I believe that suffices, because under Chapter 40A, Section 5, quote, an individual owning land to be affected by the change, unquote, may by himself submit the article to the Board of Selectmen, or in our case, the Town Council, which then has no discretion but must refer it to the Planning Board for a public hearing.
Okay. Everybody understand that, Councilor Tynes?
Just a process question through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Mullen. Given that this, is there any impact to kind of the validity of the article right now, just given that we technically didn't open the town meeting warrant until our last vote and this was submitted previously, or is it independent of the town meeting warrant process?
Independent of the town meeting timing.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Because frankly, normally, you would start this process months ago.
Yeah.
So you could have all your ducks in a row, so to speak, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
So our vote is to refer this zoning article.
I move that we refer the zoning article as discussed to the planning board.
Second. So, motion by Counselor Santos, second by Counselor Chines. Any additional discussion amongst the counselors? Okay, roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
And myself, yes. Okay, so this has been referred to the planning board. Okay. Item number 13, intermunicipal agreement, proposed intermunicipal agreement between Wakefield and Reading for animal control services. The contract is in our packet. Steve, some
Yes.
background on this?
Yes, as the council will remember that prior to the fiscal year 2022 that we're in right now, we had a longtime employee retire who was our animal control officer. I always look to kind of restructure things and see if we can do things more efficiently, really means saving money no matter how you look at it. Either you do it cheaper or you do more for the same money. So the council did reduce the animal inspector budget by $44,000, and which was really a 50% reduction. And what we did was we contracted out for the service, which means that we're not paying benefits, and we're paying a per incident amount, and we're also paying a on-call for the weekends as well. So that's been going really, really well. I think there's been great synergy between the police and between our office, and I will say, one of the few areas I have had very few concerns from the public on. Hopefully I'm not jinxing it. They took care of a stray parrot today, so they do a lot of different things. Interesting.
Parrot?
Yeah, parrot, yeah. Citizen called that had caught a parrot, and they were on it. So in any event,
So many questions.
a domestic parent, yes, somebody lost their parrot. So anyways, Reading is going through the same thing. And Reading had a longtime employee, a leave that kind of had a dual role like ours did. They were looking to maybe team up with us. So what this will do is, unfortunately, entering into this agreement with Reading will not save us a ton of money because we're going to pay for our calls. Reading is going to pay for their calls. We will split the on-call portion for the weekend, so that'll save us a little bit of money a year. And we will split the cost of the kennel, because we do have to pay for the kennel in Saugus. So this is, we've always had a great partnership with Reading. We get along great with them. I recommend we do this. I'm sorry to say this will only save us about $3,000 a year, but $3,000 a year is $3,000 a year. So it's our typical intermunicipal agreement. Tom Mullen's already been through it. Certainly, if either we or Reading find that this is not working out for us, we could terminate it quickly.
Great. Any questions for Steve or discussion? No?
All right, I move that we accept the proposed intermunicipal agreement between Wakefield and Reading for the animal control services.
Seconded.
So, motion by Counselor Santos, second by Vice Chair Butt. Any additional discussion? No? Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Okay, item number 14.
Madam Chair. Yes, item number 14. So, review and approve the results of the town sale of bonds and notes. Well, I will say that we went out to bid for about $5.5 million worth of bonds and anticipation notes. So the bonds were $3.4 million, and the bond anticipation notes or bands were a little over $2.1 million, about $2.2 million. The reason why we go out for bands is because we don't want to go through a full bonding episode because we hope to get rid of them rather quickly. So we did go out for a number of bonds, including $500,000 for work done and studies at the public safety building, $2.5 million for roads, and you remember that at town meeting a year plus ago, we did the road package, so this is the bonding for that. And $500,000 for the Greenwood roof, which was a great collaboration between us and the school department because we got a new roof that will cost about, at the end, about $1.1 million, and the state paid half of it through their emergency repair program, and $222,000 in water mains. Like I said, I'm always very nervous when we go out to bid. So we did go out to bid, and our total interest cost, or total interest cost of everything in here is 1.13%. And that is because we maintained our AAA bond rating, which is the highest rating that you can get in Massachusetts. Thank you to the work of the town council, the finance committee, my financial team of, Kevin Gill, John McCarthy, Victor Santinello, and Kathy Kelly. Great job, and I'm really, really very proud of all of them, the work we've done. Now, you'll note when we do read the vote, and I don't think you don't need to read the vote, it's in your packet, Madam Chair, you can say as presented. But when you go through it, bonds are very interesting. They'll say, this year it's a rate of 5%, this year it's a rate of 3%, this year it's a rate, and it's all over the place. And you say, Steve, how come you're telling me our total interest cost is 1.13%? Because we are being paid a premium. So think about it when you go out to get your mortgage to people in the public. You go out and you pay points on your mortgage, right? You pay, I want to get the lowest rate, I'm going to pay 2 points, and I'm going to get the lowest rate I can. So in this instance, the way the bond services work, because of our rates, they're actually paying us points. So it's kind of like we went out to bid, and they're paying us 6.7 points on $5.5 million that we're borrowing. So what we do, we take that money, is we basically apply it right to all of the bonds. So we're actually borrowing for less. So our total interest cost is 1.1%. And not to toot all our own horns there, but over the last 5 years, we've gone out for a number of bonds. And because of our AAA bond rating, the ones that we have done over the last 5 years, I think the town has saved, according to bond counsel, about $475,000. If we were just a tick lower rated. So great job by our financial team, finance committee, and of course the town council, and the taxpayers for trusting us and going forward and voting for these procedures. So I would, if we could get a vote for that, the rate can't change, but I've got to get everything back into to bond council quickly.
So instead of reading the 3 pages, I move that we approve the vote as presented in the meeting material, and the official vote will be recorded in the meeting minutes.
Seconded.
So motion by Counselor Santos, second by Vice Chair Butt. Any additional discussion on this? No?
I was just hoping that Counselor Santos was going to read the 3 pages.
We were ready for you.
We have 30 minutes left for 3 hours. We have plenty of time for that.
Sherry set us up well for that one. Feel free to read it before bed tonight. Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
And myself, yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Item 15, American Rescue Plan Act.
Yes, hopefully, WCAT will put up a very brief PowerPoint that I put together for this. Is that coming up, WCAT? Yes, no? I mean, is it? Yes, they've gone home. I just want the public to see it, because it's, no, yes. No help? Are they asleep back there? All right, I'm gonna assume they put it up. So anyways, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, was the latest in the laws that were presented by Congress to help with the COVID crisis. So this was signed into law March 11th, 2021, and, there it is, and it is used for expenses from March 31st, 2021 forward. And that is an important distinction. So in other words, this cannot be used for past expenses that you drew down under the earlier days of the CARES. The other item is, that the cost must be incurred or obligated by December 31st, 2024. So there's 3 years to spend the money, okay? And you don't need to actually spend it during that 3 years as long as it's obligated. So if we have decided we were gonna do a project that fit in under this and had been approved and everything, didn't have to be finished, it just had to be obligated by December 31st, 2024. The funds are supposedly received directly from the U.S. Treasury, which is a difference from the CARES Act. The CARES Act, you actually had to go into the state, get approval, and then they would reimburse you the money. Technically, the way it was written, these funds should come directly from the U.S. Treasury. It hasn't really happened that way. Yet we're actually receiving it through the state, which is fine, and that's why there's a little asterisk there, but it's a little bit different than it was written, but that's okay. The other item is that what will happen with this is that, unlike the CARES Act, where we got kind of semi-approval before everything was done, we're not going to get that. The state has basically said, well, we're really not going to approve anything because this isn't our money, we're just a complete pass-through in it, and they have no audit responsibility for our money. They do have their own money that they're getting, but not for ours. So we will have to work directly with the U.S. Treasury to make sure that it happens. So there will be audits in every community for years after this to make sure that was done. So it's something to keep in mind. So the U.S. Treasury laid down, a few key areas that the money can be spent on. Of course, public health spending. So anything that's, let's say, pandemic related, whether it's PPE items, whether it's training, whether it's clinics, things like that, we can spend money on that, okay? Economic impacts of the public health emergency. That is a pretty far-ranging item there, and that's kind of where we might talk a little bit about later on tonight, and we're going to talk as we go forward over the next few years. That's kind of nebulous. There's some examples given by the federal government, but I think we need to be careful and dream a little bit too as we go forward. Lost public sector revenue. This is the one that excited me the most actually when it came out, that if I can very easily say, hey, we lost, our hotel tax, for instance, was it's much more than this. It was $100,000 before the pandemic. It was $50,000 after the pandemic. We should get that $50,000 back through this item here. Well, no. They're looking at the entire revenue of the town, okay? Luckily, we did very well entirely revenue-wise, so there's probably not anything there at all. Another area is premium pay for essential workers. These are all in the Act. Another is infrastructure, and that's another big area there, provided that it certainly does help areas that suffered under the pandemic. And I do put this up there, although it's not an area where you can deploy funds. They are very specific that you cannot replenish funds, reserves, or fund pension obligations, okay? So you can't use it for pension bonds or things like that, which is too bad. So let's go through them again. Infrastructure, including roads and outdoor spaces. Very specific about outdoor spaces. We talked a little bit about that tonight. As we go forward and kind of think about our shared spaces, our common spaces, whether they're parks or parklets or they're, bump outs or, sidewalk areas, we can certainly think about how do we use that money for that. Modernization of cybersecurity. I think that's probably because more people are on Zoom, they're doing things virtually, that was part of it. Health services, certainly all of the health services, whether they be, mental health, social health, in schools and out of the schools, things we can look at, and we've actually tapped into a little of that already. School or educational services, of course, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Police, fire, and other public safety. And assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits. So these are kind of areas they also kind of talk about in here, the federal government. So I've been going to a lot of webinars, and in fact, I think I'm going to one Wednesday as well. I learn a little bit in each one, and in each one the goalposts changes a little bit, and the variances changes a little bit. But they talked about mental health services, items we can use for community-based mental health and substance abuse programs. Certainly something we've been very on top of over the years, maybe some opportunities to expand there. School-based social emotional support and other mental health services. I can think it's probably a very huge issue right now with these young children coming back to school. If they were my kids, I wouldn't care so much, but where I have a grandson, I care a hell of a lot more than I did with our own kids. You'll all find that out. Trauma recovery services speaks for itself. And we have used some of these already sprinkled through these areas as we did our budget process last year. Wanted to touch on education a little bit. We may be able to use some of this money for summer education and enrichment, really taking over the learning loss program and summer camps and recreation. One thing that is very prevalent through the federal guidance is that you really, because Wakefield does not qualify under a certain census tract, and we all know that. We're not a mini entitlement community. So we really need to look for populations that were disproportionately affected. So that's something that we're gonna have to be looking at over the next year or two. The other thing with education is that there are other buckets of money for education. So something that, the superintendent and I, we talk probably every day, multiple times a day. If there are other buckets of money that we can go towards, like the ESSER program to help out with the education, we don't necessarily want to use ARPA funds for that. We want to get as much as we can. Like we did with the CARES Act, we ended up using CARES Act funds to match what we would have to pay in for FEMA funds. So we really stretched those dollars by working the system, I guess. So we need to look at that. But there are some federal guidance they have given. So let's look at assistance could include support to enhance outdoor spaces for COVID-19 mitigation. Example, restaurant patios or improvements to built environment of the neighborhood. They even talk about facade improvements. We've been talking about that as well. Investments in public parks, plazas, other outdoor recreation spaces. But they may be responsive in the eyes of the Treasury to the needs of disproportionately impaired communities by promoting healthier living environments, outdoor recreation, and socialization. I'm thinking about ways to use our outdoors, and we've talked about perhaps a better pathway around the lake. How does that move into our downtown, to our businesses? How does that help our people that need to get out in the fresh air, and that's a great way to do it, walking around the beautiful lake. A lot of people talk to me about, building facades. Can we do something there? I think we probably can, particularly in businesses that may be, minority owned, or that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So those are things we need to look at. So I think we need to dream a little and work a little on this whole thing. So what is our share? Our share is a little over $8 million. So it's not, it's a lot to look at. We have 3 years to think about this, or to utilize it. Now, our share comes from two different sources. One is a county share. When they set up when the federal government set this program up, a lot of money went to counties that were active. So there are lots of parts of the country where you don't have a local fire department or a local police department. It's county, the county handles it. It's not the case here. So we got our per capita part of being in the county. So that was that part of it, and then we got our town funds. So a little bit over $8 million. Of that, in our budget process last year, we kind of accounted for some of this. We accounted for some of the things that we knew we were going to have in the beginning. Town hall, we have the greeters, we have those up front. We extended those hours. We put that in our budget. You may remember from our budget process. We talked about that. Police, we added hours to the clinician into the social worker. We put that into the budget. Schools talked about $400,000 for, I think it was 6 positions to work with that. So that's about $4.5 million, so we have about 400,000, we have about 7.6 million left. So nothing else is really accounted for, per se, right now. We know we're gonna have some improvements that we're gonna need to do for safety, public safety. We may have some funds there, but not anything that is huge and gigantic now. So I think we need to think about these, and our next steps are, town council needs to talk about their priorities, and we'll probably schedule another meeting to talk about that. We really need to collaborate with the school department and school committee. How can we work together to parlay this money? And our departments, and I bring them all in there. I think this is very important part of a tri-board discussion, when we do have that October 21st, I believe is the date we're talking about there. And there certainly should be a lot of public input on this, because there are items that people will see. I think of some nonprofits that were hurt. I think of some businesses on some of our areas that were really hurt by this. Sure, they got their, maybe they struggled through this, but maybe there's things we can do to enhance the neighborhood. I think of bringing more business down Albion Street. We have a lot of businesses down there that had a lot of problems, a lot of minority and women-owned businesses down there that I think hopefully can help us, get under that threshold. And I think we really need to make sure that we use ESSER and other grants that we kind of dovetail this all things. That's going to take a lot of coordination between us and the other departments. So there is a webinar on Wednesday, and it's through our friends at the MAPC, and it's entitled, How Municipalities Can Make Meaningful Investments with ARPA Dollars. So I will certainly be on there. I will send out the link to everybody. If you want to go on it, you're welcome. I don't write down the time there, but luckily it's in my phone. And that is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I will share that with everyone. So I really just wanted to get the council's kind of interest to talk about this. I mean, there's a lot to go through. There is no rush. There are things we may want to do now, but I think if we're thoughtful, we work together with our other boards, committees, and the communities, we're going to get a really big bang for this. I mean, there are some projects right now that we may think about using a little bit of this for in the enhancements, and that's easy. But I think there could be some larger projects you can get some big bangs out of. So that was it. I have way more questions than answers, but I'll see what I can, Madam Chair, on this.
Well, it's exciting.
Very exciting.
To think about. Does anybody want to share any ideas now, or it's getting?
Just very briefly, I think I've mentioned this probably in every discussion Steve and I have had on this, but I am very excited about the potential opportunity to use some of the funds to think about the path around the lake. I mean, I think when we look at the pandemic, we saw just how important the lake was to the town. Not that we didn't already know, but I just think in the early days of quarantine, how many people were walking around the lake, and how we saw where those choke points were, and where there were some pedestrian safety concerns given sort of the proximity to the street. And so I think that not only sort of fits within the spirit and the requirements of the dollars, but it also potentially creates a legacy project for the town that, really would pay dividends for generations to come. And so I, again, will put that out there as probably at the top of my wish list. I think mental health support is another huge area of opportunity here. I think that it's going to take us years to really understand the trauma that people have felt in school, in town, and elsewhere. And so we've made some great investments there. I suspect that we will find that that's not going to be enough.
I think you're right.
I think so too.
Yeah, just to echo everything Jonathan said, and, also every opportunity to talk about a townwide social worker. I think, the more we talk about it, the more we can make that happen, because I do think there'll just be a lot that we need to process everything that happened. Steve, I love you talking about women-owned and minority-owned businesses in town, and I don't know if Erin's created kind of a list of that, or the chamber, but I think even getting some of that information before we having conversations would be really helpful. And I know, early on in the pandemic, people of color were kind of hit by COVID the hardest, and we saw that in Wakefield also. And I think just to use that racial equity lens when we're talking about stuff. And then the path around the lake, I think outdoor spaces, we saw like parks and the forest and paths everywhere, Breakheart. And I think to think about, what playgrounds need updated, because people just, another community garden, as I like to talk about. But I really think that's kind of what Wakefield did really well. And it's parklets, it's, I think most of the businesses paid for their own outdoor spaces. And is there a way for us to kind of make some that's, we talked about this at the Greenwood School, that anyone can use, like all the, shared spaces. And so think about that, because Anne's right, we're going to, and without the E, we're going to become more like DC with heat lamps and just sitting outside more, and people will prefer it, but we just have to make those areas, so. Oh, rail trail also, as we have the bike trail, so think about some of these projects we know that they're coming, and how can we just make them inclusive and working for, more people in town.
Great. Anyone else? All right, so we're going to have to put this on the agenda, I think, for a
This will
more.
be on, there'll be many discussions here.
Yes.
Just wanted to get the
Yep, no,
ideas
I
flowing.
think it's good to have the, kind of the parameters drawn, just really helpful. Item 16, ethics exemption. We have a request for approval of ethics exemption for Candace Linehan and school department to permit Candace Linehan to serve as district nurse practitioner. I'm going to pass this to Tom.
Sure. Madam Chair, school department desperately needs a district nurse practitioner. They can't give out a single aspirin unless there is a person so designated. They had no one. They checked with neighboring towns to see if they could borrow such a person. They couldn't. Enter Candace Linehan, an elected, uncompensated member of the Board of Health. And of course, since no good deed goes unpunished, her uncompensated service for the town complicated her ability to take on this position, which has a modest stipend of $4,400 a year. Under Chapter 268A, Section 20, she may not take such a position without filing with the town clerk a disclosure of what she's doing and getting the written approval of the superintendent of schools and of the town council. So what we're here today to do is to ask the town council to authorize the chair to sign an exemption of her from this general rule forbidding anybody who is a, quote, municipal employee, end quote, from having a separate contract with the town.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me. So let's make the motion in second, and then we can see if there's any discussion.
I move that we approve of the ethics exemption by Candace Linehan and School Department to permit Candace Linehan to serve as district nurse practitioner as noted by Town Council.
Seconded.
So motion made by Counselor Santos, seconded by Vice Chair Butt. Any discussion? No? Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Okay, item 17. Do I hear a motion to accept and expend donations in the amount of $649.35 from various donors with thanks?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, moved by Counselor Santos, seconded by Vice Chair Butt. Any discussion? No? Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy?
Yes.
Counselor Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Okay, new page. Jonathan, update on warrants.
Yes. So on August 18th, I signed the final warrant for fiscal year 2021, warrant number 55 for $828,000, and also warrants 2, 4, and 5 for fiscal 2022 for a total of $7.1 million plus regular payroll. Details are in the packet. Happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jonathan? Item 19, announcements. Any announcements? Counselor Santos.
Yes, I spoke with both Chief Scory and Chief Sullivan just to get some updates from those departments. The police department recently received a grant of $7,500 to fund their child safety seat program that a lot of us did many years ago. Officer Ryan Doran and K-9 Luna will be graduating from the Connecticut State Police K-9 Tracking School on Friday, September 17th. And the tracking focuses on missing and endangered people, which I think is a really lovely addition to the department. On September 29th, speaking of mental health, the officers will be attending a 4-hour training on officer wellness done by someone at a national level who speaks to police officers on how to maintain their mental health in stressful occupation. And we've certainly seen a number of incidents where Chief Scory is so receptive to making sure his men and women are healthy and in a good place. From the fire department, we were all at a absolutely beautiful 9/11 ceremony. And to see the firefighters and police take part in it. And I know that some of our local firefighters spent time on the Twin Towers pile, went down without hesitation to assist their fellow firefighters. So just want to throw out a real thanks to them. We also have 5 new recruits scheduled to graduate in early October, which will bring the department to 55, which is the first time we've had that numbers in 45 years. And speaking about development and how town's expanding, I think that's a great addition. There's a brand new fire engine also put into service. And finally, in some very sad news, meaningful to the police, the fire department and police, I'm sure, Lieutenant Rob Ford is fighting a devastating battle of cancer. And I know his family because his children are close to my children's age and would see them at sporting events. This is someone who's beloved by the department. It's just a lovely family. And I think they're having some sort of fundraiser or something in the very near future. But the firefighters are very impacted by this right now. So that's what, and I'll also add, since I have the floor, the ASL walk that we did in honor of Peter May on Saturday was absolutely wonderful, and to see, I thought the joy was palpable, and Peter looked fabulous, and to see so many people come together to support him was heartwarming for us, and I know for he and Eileen. So that's it. Very good.
Councilor Giles?
Great. Just a couple of updates. First, I just wanted to share, we referenced Vision 2030 earlier when we were talking about the master planning process. That is moving forward. We've had our public forums and done our surveys, and actually do have a first draft of the report out for that process that's in place. That's currently with the advisory group that we had assembled to work through this for review, comment, and editing. And then once we go through that process, we'll then be sharing a draft with the town council for our comment and for public comment as well. So we're getting to the end of the process there. And again, just want to thank MAPC, Erin Kakinda, Jen McDonald, and everyone in town hall who's helped with that. Our advisory group members as well have put a lot of time into that. On the school side, I think folks have seen this as well, but we do have a designer contracted for the Wakefield High School feasibility study, which is really exciting. The designer is SMMA based in Cambridge. They've also worked on high school projects in Waltham, Winchester, Somerville, and Wellesley. Somerville opened just recently, and my wife works for the city of Somerville, and I've heard people say it is just absolutely stunning. So really excited about them. Also excited because having the designer in place means that the next steps of the feasibility study process, where we start to invite public feedback and have workshops and forums on what we want to see in the school, will really kick off in earnest. So keep an eye out for that over the next several months, and I hope we have some great participation in that. Finally, just wanted to add my thanks to the Council of Clergy. As Ann mentioned, there really was a very moving commemoration for September 11th on Saturday. and that was largely organized by some of the clergy members in town, and really wanted to express my thanks for them, and the civic focus that they have, and the collaboration that they have among each other as a group of faith leaders in our town. I was glad to be there, and I think everyone who participated got a lot out of it. So just kudos to them, and thanks to them for all their great work.
Thank you.
Just two things. One, I've been thinking about the Broadway closing, and it was the right vote and the right thing to do. But I'm, through you, Steve, just asking that we make sure we announce it in all public places. As someone who lives across from the Greenwood train station, I know the last commuter rail leaves North Station at 11:59 at night, and so probably buzzes at 12:20. And just to let people know to expect that, I think it's going to be really important, and not. I know people don't watch our meetings, so just as someone who will hear that throughout the day, just hope we, I don't think it needs to be a code red, but just kind of, get it out in as many places as we can. And then just as we talk about nonprofits in town, just Wakefield Alliance Against Violence is one of those that does such great work. They actually have a meeting. Their monthly meeting is Wednesday in this room, and they have scheduled their race, their annual fundraiser, on October 16th. So there's more information on their website or on Facebook, but please sign up and participate. It's just such a great organization, all led by volunteers. So those are my two announcements.
Great. Councilor Dennehy?
I wanted to wish all of the families and children that are back in school. I'm hoping that they all have a successful year. I know that my neighbors seem to be very happy, parents and children, to be going. So, so I hope we have a successful year, and students are excited. So it's always an exciting time of year.
It is. It's fun to see them all going off to school. Anybody else? I'll just add Finance Committee. There's some nominations open for Finance Committee if there's any interest. Anybody else? Steve, Tom, Sherry?
I had a couple things very quickly. At our next meeting on the 27th, the vocational school will be invited in to talk about their project, as well as our project. The chair and I attended was supposed to be a lovely breakfast meeting up there.
Yeah, he told me it was going to be this beautiful
Beautiful breakfast. I said, you need to come. And we promptly got up there, and it was crazy everywhere, as they had a pretty significant gas leak, which caused them to close school 2 days. They did reopen today. I thought it was great timing on the part of the superintendent to do that, as all the communities were there to talk about the importance of their project and building a new school after that.
It confirmed the need for 2 entrances and exits.
Yes,
is what it did.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that will be coming forward. That looks like it's going to be a very a great project for our other high school. And with the importance of trades today, particularly, I think it's great that there. Our new health agent, jointly with Melrose, started today. He will be invited to our next meeting. Anthony Chu. He comes to us with a master's in public health from the Yale School of Public Health. So he is a very bright young person, and I think is going to do great things. And I think the department is thrilled to have. Will be thrilled to have his presence, and a great shout out and thanks to Elaine Silva, who I twisted her arm early on to step in, and then twisted it again when I needed to extend her time. And great asset to Wakefield, and she'll be back, but she's going to be helping out, and she a wonderful lady, wonderful family. On that subject, we will be having to think about replacing somebody on the health board, so that'll be coming forward shortly as well. Did I mention I'll be meeting Representative Moulton tomorrow? One of the things I'll be pushing is our quad gates, which are in his bill. So he is speaking to the chamber tomorrow morning, and I will certainly thank him for his putting it in there, and that we need it back. And finally, on a personal note, there is going to be a retirement at the school department, and I don't know if this is public yet, but I really don't care. Brad Simpson is retiring as basketball coach. He decided that now was time. I got to tell you, he's a person who really wanted to develop the person he was coaching, not the player he was coaching so much, but the person, and touched a lot of lives and made a lot of young men a lot better. And by the way, he won 500 games and state championships at the same time, so he proved you could do it well. I know that I had the pleasure for playing for him, not quite as well as he would have liked, I'm sure. I had the great pleasure of watching my son play for him. So, great guy. He will be missed. He is around town, but it was his decision. He felt it was time. So, big shoes to fill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any matters not anticipated for the agenda? No? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Moved by Counselor Santos,
It's
second
late.
by
I'm sorry.
Vice Chair Butt. Roll call vote. Counselor Danahy.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Vice Chair Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
And myself, yes. Thank you very much. We will return here on September 27th, 2 weeks' time. Have a wonderful couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.